Chapter 1540. Zheng Yang appears. Is she the newly appointed guild leader of the Spirit Awakener Guild, Wang Ying? That's definitely her. I've met her before. She might be young, but her talent in spirit enchantment is definitely peerless in this world. It took her only a few months in order to raise her mastery in spirit enchantment to a level where she could clear even the Spirit Awakener Tower. She mentioned that she came here to save her teacher. Does that mean that Zhongxian is her teacher too? This. First, the head of the Poison Hall, then, a soul oracle expert, and now, the new guild leader of the Spirit Awakener Guild. All of the master teachers could not help but shudder as they lowered their gazes to look at the young man sitting on the ground beneath. No words could describe the shock in their hearts. As 9-star master teachers, they knew very well just how difficult it was to groom a student to become an expert. Each of them had countless students all over the world, but hardly any of their students had succeeded in reaching the top echelon of the master teacher continent like them. This was apparent just by seeing how low the number of individuals who had reached a proficiency of 9-star in any occupation was. Yet, the young man below, despite being only at St. 8 Dan Dimension Sundering Realm, actually had multiple powerhouses as his students. Just how in the world was this possible? More importantly, those students were willing to even defy the powerful and influential Master Teacher Pavilion in order to save him. Just how deep did their feelings for him run? While the prevalent culture on the Master Teacher continent prompted one to remain loyal to one's lineage, there were still plenty of cultivators who paid it no regard. Furthermore, given that Zhongxian had been condemned by even the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, no one would blame them for not coming to the rescue of their teacher. They could have simply feigned ignorance and steered clear of this mess. After all, the verdict of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters was absolute on the continent. But for their teacher, those people were willing to disregard all rules and risk the bright futures that they had ahead of them to dive right into this mess. If things went wrong, they could very well lose their lives. Just what in the world did Zhongxian impart to them for them to be so loyal to him? Gritting his teeth tightly, Ren Qingyuan harumphed with an utterly cold voice. Guild leader Wang, do you understand who you are going against at this very moment? I do, but I am heavily indebted to my teacher. Whoever dares lay a finger on my teacher, no matter who they are, I'll pit my life against them without any hesitation, the young lady replied calmly. So, if I understand your words correctly, you are saying that Zhongxian is your teacher. Is that right? Ren Qingyuan asked. Indeed. Zhongxian is the name of my teacher, and he's the person who made me the person I am today, the young lady replied once more. The person who had just arrived with a huge army of buildings was none other than Wang Ying. All of the buildings within a 30,000 li radius from the Glacier Plain Court had been enchanted by the elders of their Spirit Awakener Guild, and together, they formed a massive army that even 9-star master teachers would have trouble dealing with all of a sudden. Zhongxian has willfully wreaked havoc in the Zhong clan and injured dozens of their elders, including the first elder Zhong Wuheng. After which, he went to the Sanctum of Sages and severely wounded its deputy sanctum head, Zhon Shi. Following that, he ran over to the Glacier Plain Court, kidnapped their young court chief, and destroyed many of their buildings. While doing so, Ren Qingyuan spat coldly. Even if we put all that aside for the moment, just the fact that he is the teacher of the vicious head of the depraved Poison Hall and a deplorable soul oracle, along with the existence of the otherworldly demonic tribe artifact that is placed right in front of him, is more than enough for the Master Teacher Pavilion to deem him an enemy of mankind. He might be your teacher, but his sins are unpardonable. Vicious. Deplorable. Ha ha ha. Wang Ying sneered coldly upon hearing those words. You claimed that my junior Wei Ruyan is a vicious person. Very well, why don't you tell me what vicious deeds she has done? Has she massacred millions in cold blood? Look at the poisoned master teachers in front of her. Is that not sufficient evidence to prove her vicious character? Ren Qingyuan sneered. They might be poisoned, but aren't they still alive? In fact, if my junior Wei Ruyan hadn't incapacitated them and used them as a chip to protect her and my teacher, you would have been the ones to murder them in cold blood. You claimed that my junior is vicious, but can you name anyone whom she has killed to date? I reckon that there's probably more blood on your hands than hers. Wang Ying snapped. Wang Ying's outburst left Ren Qingyuan speechless for a moment. The head of the poison hall had indeed gone around poisoning their master teachers one after another, but she had only knocked them out. Despite the terrible states that they were in, it did not seem like anyone had lost their life yet. Even though they were on the opposing side, looking at it once more, it did appear that the head of the poison hall was not intending to kill any of their master teachers, at least not yet. You also mentioned that my junior Lu Chong is a deplorable individual. Very well, why don't you tell me what deplorable deeds he has committed? Just what great sin has he committed for the impartial master-teacher pavilion to denounce him so? Wang Ying asked imposingly. Once again, Ren Qingyuan was rendered speechless. To be honest, he would not even have known that there would still be a living soul oracle in the world if Lu Chong had not appeared there. From the fact that he had never heard of the young man before alone, it showed that the young man had not done anything wrong that was worthy of the master-teacher pavilion's attention. Why aren't you speaking? After all the suffering that her teacher and juniors had gone through, Wang Ying was not intending to let Ren Qingyuan off just like that. With a cold sneer, she continued. The master-teacher pavilion has always prided itself on being just and impartial. Just when did it become so presumptuous as to state its own opinions as facts and pass judgment on others based on its own biases? You claimed that my teacher kidnapped the young court chief of the Glacier Plain Court, but let me ask you one question. Do you know whom the young court chief is? Whom the young court chief is? Ren Qingyuan frowned. She's a cultivator who possesses the rare pure yin body. The Glacier Plain Court went to great lengths in order to find her. Seeing that Ren Qingyuan really did not know anything at all, Wang Ying did not have the patience to listen to him speak any longer. I don't know what lengths the Glacier Plain Court has gone in order to find her, but there's one thing I do know, and that is. Placing her hands behind her back, she said, she's my senior. Your senior? You mean to say that the young court chief of the Glacier Plain Court is Zhongxian's student as well? Ren Qingyuan narrowed his eyes in shock. He quickly turned his gaze toward Yu Ruoxin and asked lividly, is this true? The Glacier Plain Court had not mentioned this when they reported the matter to them back then. Zhongxian was indeed Zhao Wei's teacher for a period of time, but it's also a fact that he impersonated Yangshe, took away our young court chief, and wreaked havoc in the Glacier Plain Court. Furthermore, the fact that he's the teacher of a poison master and soul oracle shows that he's a person of questionable character. Pavilion Master Ren, I ask of you not to be blinded by the words of despicable scoundrels. Yu Ruoxin quickly spoke up. Questionable character? Despicable scoundrels? How dare you use such words on my teacher and senior? Hula! Before Yu Ruoxin could finish speaking, a furious bellow suddenly echoed from afar. Following which, a spear burst forth from the distance, and before she knew it, it was already right before her chest. Yu Ruoxin's face turned pale, and her eyes widened in absolute fright as she desperately retreated. As powerful as she was, she could tell that the might of that spear had already far surpassed her means to deal with. Even before the spear could reach her, she could already feel the force that it commanded threatening to pierce right through her heart. Hoo. While retreating, she anxiously formed over 100 hand seals in the blink of an eye. Following which, a transparent barrier reminiscent of crystal materialized right in front of her. The strongest defensive technique of the Glacier Plain Court, immaculate glacial yin wall. Catcher. The next instant, the flying spear collided head-on with the wall, but the wall did not even last for a breath before cracks began appearing throughout it. Yu Ruoxin could tell that the barrier that she had created would not be able to withstand the might of the spear, and once the spear penetrated her barrier, even if she survived the ordeal, she would be crippled for good. Thus, she turned to Ren Qingyuan and shrieked, Pavilion Master Ren, save me. Humph. Ren Qingyuan harumphed coldly, and as if he had teleported, he appeared instantaneously before the spear with a powerful leap. He immediately swung the sword in his hand toward the tip of the spear, intending to forcefully change its trajectory. Ding 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 ding. However, there was some kind of bizarre vibration to the spear that caused it to continuously strike down on his sword with incredible force, and every single tremor held such tremendous force that it felt as if entire mountains were ramming into his sword one after another. Deng 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 deng. Ren Qingyuan was forced to retreat several steps under the formidable might of the spear, but fortunately, he still succeeded in altering the spear's path. However, he was in no mood to celebrate at all. Shaking his numbed hand, he stared at the deflected spear with a look of disbelief on his face. That spear had come from a distance away, but even after piercing through Yu Ruoxin's immaculate glacial yin wall, it still wielded enough strength to force him back. Just how powerful was the man who threw the spear? His doubt did not last for too long. A young man flitted in from the distance, stopping right before the crowd. He stood with a perfectly upright figure in the air, emanating an aura of sharpness that seemed as if it could pierce the heavens. The young man raised his hand, and the spear that Ren Qingyuan had just deflected flew into his grasp. Following which, he turned his gaze toward Ren Qingyuan and said, "Pavilion Master Ren, I'll be taking my teacher back. I presume that you have no objections." Chapter 1541 Teacher, allow me to vent your anger for you, progeny of combat. What do you mean by this? Recognizing who the other party was, Ren Qingyuan's face twitched uncontrollably. Taking a deep breath to calm himself down, he said, "You have to remember that everything you have now was given by the Master Teacher Pavilion. As long as we will it so, the Master Teacher Pavilion can take away everything that you have anytime we wish." "Take away everything I have?" Completely unfazed by what Ren Qingyuan had said, Zheng Yang waved his hand nonchalantly and replied, "Do whatever pleases you." After which, he descended toward Zhongxian. Progeny of combat Zheng Yang, just what kind of attitude do you think you are showing us? Unable to tolerate the young man's unconcerned reaction, Elder Chu dashed forward and blocked his path. Even though he had been poisoned by Wei Ruyan earlier, as a 9-star master teacher, he had a deep understanding of medicine, and on top of that, he was also a powerful cultivator himself. After recuperating for a moment, he had already recovered enough to move around without any trouble. "Don't block my way." Zheng Yang glanced at the elder standing before him with narrowed eyes. "Scram. Audacious. Is this how you address a 9-star master teacher?" The infuriated elder Chu snapped as his face turned crimson. Every single one of Zhongxian's students was more arrogant than the last. "We might not have the influence to interfere in the affairs of the Poison Hall, Soul Oracles, and Spirit Awakener Guild, but the Combat Master Hall is a subsidiary of the Master Teacher Pavilion. How dare you bite the hand that feeds you? Then how do you want me to address you? Shall I kneel to you?" Zheng Yang scoffed. "You don't have to kneel to me, but you should understand that the strength and influence you possess right now is all due to the credit of the Master Teacher Pavilion. You are indebted to us. Don't bite the hand that feeds you and ruin your own future." Halfway through Elder Chu's words, he suddenly felt his goosebumps rising up. The next instant, he saw a spear piercing right in his direction, and the powerful aura that it commanded seemed as if it would tear his primordial spirit to shreds. "You!" Alarmed, Elder Chu quickly whipped out a sword to defend against the spear. Ding! As the tip of the spear and the sword collided with a metallic clang, Elder Chu felt overwhelming might surging up his arm, seemingly threatening to jolt his meridians into shreds. Pu! The sword flew out of his hands, and he spurted a mouthful of blood as he was forced back a couple of steps. But before he could regain his footing once more, he saw the body of a spear flicking forcefully in his direction. He instinctively cowered in fear, and he hurriedly raised his palms to defend himself. Catcher! Catcher! Under the astounding might of the spear whip, Elder Chu's body slammed right into the ground, creating a huge pit beneath him on impact. "I am already sparing your pride, but you still want to lecture me?" Zheng Yang scoffed as he clapped the dust off his hands and put his spear back leisurely, as if he had just done something insignificant. "Elder Chu, progeny of combat, just what in the world are you doing?" Not expecting the other party to knock Elder Chu flying without the slightest hesitation, the surrounding master teachers flew into an uproar. They rushed forward to surround Zheng Yang, seemingly intending to lynch him. "Are you thinking of making a move on me?" Despite the precarious situation that he was in, Zheng Yang did not show the slightest hint of anxiety. Instead, he lifted his gaze and bellowed, "These people are thinking of killing your progeny of combat. If you don't wish to be without a hall master, stop them." Voila! Right after those words were spoken, the master teachers saw the scene before them blurring. The surrounding space distorted for a moment before revealing 8 elders. Each of them emanated an aura of bloodshed, reminiscent of valiant warriors who had just walked out of a battlefield. Wang. The 8 elders drew their swords simultaneously, and a massive spatial rift created a gap between the master teachers and them. One of the 8 elders swept his gaze across the master teachers before saying in a firm voice, "I'll have to ask you all not to advance any further than this. It wasn't easy for the Combat Master Hall to find a progeny of combat, and we don't wish for anything to go wrong at this point." Hearing the words of the elder, Ren Qingyuan felt blood rushing into his head as he roared, "Preposterous! This is utterly preposterous. Are you all starting a mutiny here?" Ever since the founding of the Master Teacher Pavilion many millenniums ago, it had always taken the role of the leader of mankind, standing in a position that commanded respect and deference from the masses. There had never been a single power who dared oppose it. Yet, in the course of a single day, 4 powers had raised their arms against them. Mutiny. Just like how water can float the boat, it can also devour it whole as well. If the Master Teacher Pavilion is just and impartial, no one will question its judgment. But if it has strayed from the principles that it embraced, it'll find many standing up to oppose it. Zheng Yang replied coldly before turning his attention away from the master teachers altogether. He descended to the ground and kneeled on the floor. Disciple Zheng Yang pays respect to teacher. Zhong Xian looked at his student from head to toe and nodded with a warm smile. Get up. Over the past few months, Zheng Yang had grown far more than he had expected, reaching a level that even he could hardly see through. Teacher, I heard that the Master Teacher Pavilion has issued an arrest warrant on you due to the Zhong clan reporting that you have utilized an artifact of the otherworldly demonic tribe. Zheng Yang stood up and asked respectfully, "May I know if that's true?" After pondering for a moment, Zhong Xian nodded. That seems to be the case. To be honest, he was not too sure why the Master Teacher Pavilion had chosen to release an arrest warrant on him, but the cause should be tied to the incident that had happened back at the Zhong clan. Back then, he had been in a rush to save Zhao Ya, so he had ended up borrowing vicious strength to deal with Zhong Wuheng. That could be the reason the Master Teacher Pavilion had ended up taking such a severe stance against him. After all, the Master Teacher Pavilion had always been wary of the otherworldly demonic tribe, and when the security of mankind was at stake, it was understandable that they would rather be safe than sorry. Teacher, you have fought against the otherworldly demonic tribe and single-handedly destroyed an entire otherworldly demon emperor lineage. Yet, due to an inkling of doubt that had to be verified, the Zhong clan insisted that you are guilty and demanded your punishment. Years of holding onto their title as the #1 sage clan sure has inflated their guts. They seem to think that they can do as they please without facing the consequences. Zheng Yang sneered coldly before clasping his fist and bowing grandly to Zhong Xian. Teacher, please allow me to vent your anger for you. You want to help me get back at them? Knowing Zheng Yang's hot temper, Zhong Xian sighed deeply before nodding. Don't take anyone's life. It will do just to teach them a lesson. I understand, teacher. Nodding, Zheng Yang slammed the spear in his hand onto the ground, causing the ground to tremor. He turned his gaze upward and scanned the crowd above before saying, Ruyan and Lu Chong, the Zhong clan, the Sanctum of Sages, and the Glacier Plain Court have framed our teacher and attempted to take our teacher's life. Are you willing to help me exact vengeance for our teacher and bring honor and dignity back to his name? Of course. Wei Ruyan took a step forward. It's my responsibility to do so. Lu Chong replied as he walked forward, too. Good. Zheng Yang replied heartily. He directed a cold and severe glare toward an old man amid the crowd above and bellowed, Zhong Wuheng, not only have you injured my teacher, you even issued an order to have him surrounded and kill. For the humiliation that you have caused to my teacher, I, Zheng Yang, shall challenge you to a duel in the stead of my teacher. Do you dare accept my duel? Hula. Zheng Yang flicked his spear to the side, and spatial ripples appeared along the movement of his spear. You are challenging me to a fight. Not expecting a young lad who was not even in his 20s yet to dare challenge him to a duel, Zhong Wuheng sneered in disdain. Very well, come. Boom. Before Zhong Wuheng could finish his sentence, a piercing shrill like a sharp blast of wind suddenly echoed from above. He quickly raised his head, only to see a massive figure falling from the sky, heading right in his direction. Catcher. Before he could even react, A massive bottom had already slammed him down all the way into the ground, causing several of his ribs to fracture. A huge number of his teeth scattered all over the ground as he coughed mouthful after mouthful of blood. Seniors and juniors, how can you leave me out for a gathering like this? It seems like I have arrived late to the party, the owner of the massive bottom said with a bright smile, revealing his gleaming, white teeth. Chapter 1542 Unexpected Changes with the Pavilion Master Seal. Seeing the familiar face on the figure sitting on top of Zhong Wuheng, Zheng Yang replied with a heart chuckle, "You came at the perfect time." With his eye of discernment, he could tell that Yuan Dao was far from a match for Zhong Wuheng. However, it seemed like while the rest of them had been protecting their teacher from the master teachers, this junior of his had not been slacking. The latter had flown to the highest altitude possible given the limits of his strength, likely tens of thousands of meters up in the sky, and he had dived all the way down from that height toward them. By the time Yuan Dao reached them, the speed of his fall had already reached several times the speed of sound. As the attack had come too quickly from an unexpected angle, not to mention that his attention had been captured by Zheng Yang, Zhong Wuheng had been caught off guard by the attack from above. This brief lapse in attention had been more than enough for the swiftly plummeting Yuan Dao to get him. The impact of the fall from someone who had been accelerating furiously for tens of thousands of meters was not one to be underestimated. While it was not enough to kill Zhong Wuheng, it had inflicted grievous injuries that would incapacitate him in the short run. Who could have thought that the first elder of the Zhong clan, one of the top experts in the world, would actually end up being incapacitated by someone's bottom before he could even use his bloodline ability? This would really be a huge smirch on his reputation. That's a relief. Yuan Dao patted his bottom before getting to his feet. Then, as if suddenly realizing that someone was beneath his bottom, he turned around and exclaimed with an exaggeratedly shocked expression, "Elder Wuheng, what are you doing under me?" "You. Pu." Seeing the innocent look on the fellow who had nearly crushed him to death, Zhong Wuheng spurted another mouthful of blood out of indignation. "Elder Wuheng, our Yuan clan has always been on close terms with Zhong clan, and we have never crossed one another before. Why would you appear beneath my ass of all places? Do you know how many days it has been since I last washed my ass? Furthermore, I went to the toilet before this, and I couldn't find any toilet paper. How embarrassing it is. Quick, come out, come out. I'll heal you up right now." With an anxious look on his face, Yuan Dao stretched his hand forward to grab Zhong Wuheng's head, and as if pulling a radish out from the earth, he plucked the latter out from the hole that he was in. Pu. Feeling as if his neck was on the verge of snapping apart, the first elder spurted another mouthful of blood. The sheer embarrassment from the situation made his eyes red in anger, and he was on the verge of erupting at any moment. He was the most authoritative individual in the Zhong clan other than the clan head. How could he tolerate being humiliated by such a brat so much younger than him? In a state of rage, Zhong Wuheng was just about to drive his Zhenqi to teach the brat a lesson when the latter suddenly turned to Zhong Xian and said, "Teacher, it seems like the first elder's injuries are really quite severe. I remember that you have a pummeling healing therapy technique. Can I ask you to impart it to me so that I can treat him so as to make up for my previous mistakes?" Pummeling healing therapy technique? Hearing those words, Zhong Wuheng nearly choked on his saliva. Just that bottom landing on him had nearly knocked him out of shape. If the other party pummeled him on top of that. Is this how you treat an elder from a clan that is close with your Yuan clan? Junior Yuan Dao, your memory is really failing you. That skill is called beast taming pummeling technique, not pummeling healing therapy technique. No matter how formidable a saint beast it was, as long as our teacher gave it a good beating, it would submit to him obediently. Zheng Yang kindly reminded by the side. "Ah, yes, you're right. It's beast taming pummeling technique. How did I remember it wrongly? My apologies, I guess it might be because he doesn't look too humane to me. But back to the topic at hand, I came out in such a hurry that I forgot to bring any recovery medicine with me." Yuan Dao turned his sight to the young lady not too far away and asked, "Junior Ruyan, do you have any good ointment or the sort that you could lend me? You poison masters often concoct all sort of stuff, so you should have quite a few with you, right?" "I do have quite a few incredible pills with me. Within 10 breaths after consumption, the patient will be permanently relieved from all pain and suffering, Wei Ruyan replied with a sweet smile as she passed a jade bottle over. You really are my savior, Junior Ruyan. I can tell that it's an incredible medicine with just a glance. Elder Wuheng, I really didn't do it purposely earlier. Hey, Elder Wuheng. Don't run away, I haven't treated you yet. After grabbing the jade bottle, Yuan Dao was intending to feed the pill to the first elder when he found that the fellow whom he had just plucked out of the ground had already fled far away with a frenzied look on his face. If not for the fact that he was severely injured, he would have torn Yuan Dao apart right there and then. What a pity. You do know this is really good medicine, don't you? You sure don't know how to appreciate good stuff, Yuan Dao grumbled with a look of pity on his face. Shaking his head, he turned to Zheng Yang and asked, since I'm not late, whom shall I face? You can just sit by the side and enjoy the show. That woman is mine to deal with. With an imposing wave of her hand, Wei Ruyan directed a piercing gaze at the first elder of the Glacier Plain Court and said, Elder Yu Ruoxin, you framed my teacher and incited the Master Teacher Pavilion to issue an arrest warrant on him. I'll officially challenge you to a duel right now. Since you have the guts to harm my teacher, I believe that you should have the gut to face me in a battle too, right? Yu Ruoxin's face paled. She had already witnessed the young lady's prowess earlier, and her poison art was truly indomitable. Yu Ruoxin had confidence in her own strength, but she was not so arrogant as to think that she would be able to match someone who could poison even a 9-star master teacher to death with ease. Why? Getting scared now? Wei Ruyan scoffed in disdain before turning her sights to Zhonshe. What about you then? Zhonshe's lips twitched, but he did not dare reply to Wei Ruyan's provocation. He was only at St. Nindan primary stage, a long way off from matching up to Elder Chu and the others. If the young lady really made a move, he would probably be defeated in a heartbeat. Very well, I won't take advantage of you all. Wei Ruyan flung her sleeves and declared majestically, your Glacier Plain Court and Sanctum of Sages can rally all of your experts together. I'll face them all at once. Unable to take the provocations anymore, Yu Ruoxin bellowed, Hallmaster Wei, don't go too far. Are you saying that I'm going too far? When you brought so many people to encircle my teacher, did you ever think that you were going too far? Whether you like it or not, none of you will be getting away from here unscathed. Wei Ruyan harumphed coldly as she dashed right for Yu Ruoxin. Before she even arrived, her poison aura had already scattered into the surroundings in the form of a pink mist. Don't think that I'll be scared of you. Your poison art might be formidable, but I won't allow you to humiliate me that easily. Knowing that there was no way out of this, Yu Ruoxin bellowed furiously as she thrust a finger forth. The surrounding temperature suddenly plunged along with her movement, and it almost felt as if everything within a radius of tens of li would be frozen. She knew that Wei Ruyan would be a powerful adversary, so she had no intention of holding back at all. She drove her pure yin energy to its very limits and released it all at once. Seems like you can at least put up a fight. Wei Ruyan scoffed. Without paying any heed to the chilling energy that Yu Ruoxin was emanating, she continued dashing forward. When she was only 200 meters away from the latter, she suddenly raised her hand and clenched it. Boom! A light yellow shockwave burst forth, and when Yu Ruoxin's chilling energy came into contact with it, it was first forcefully pushed back before abruptly sinking into the ground, as if infused with lead. What a formidable poison art that is! The surrounding crowd felt a numbing sensation on their scalps. To be able to render even one's zhenqi immobile, the reputation of the innate poison body truly was not unfounded. These children have really grown up. Zhongxian nodded with a heartened smile. The previous time that his students had helped him exact vengeance was back when they were still in the Tianxian kingdom. It had taken every single one of them to collaborate with one another before they had been able to defeat Lu Zun then, but now, they had all grown into powerhouses that could fight toe-to-toe with even the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarter. The rate that they had changed left him feeling a mixture of happiness and nostalgia. At least, it seems like the effort that I have devoted toward them wasn't wasted, Zhongxian remarked. As a teacher, there was probably no happier occasion than seeing one's student maturing. In that moment, it would feel as if all of the hard work that one had put in was worthwhile. All of a sudden, Zhongxian's eyebrows shot up. He flicked his wrist, and a seal appeared in the middle of his palm. At this moment, the seal was trembling excitedly, such that it felt searing to Zhongxian. Chapter 1543 The Unreliable Kong Shi. Zhongxian frowned doubtfully. It didn't take in my blood, and I have unable to delve my consciousness into it either. Why would it suddenly grow so hot? Previously, he had been thinking of all sorts of ways in order to tame the seal, but no matter what he did, there was no response at all. Why would it suddenly grow so hot after being placed inside his storage ring? It was the greatest treasure of the Master-Teacher Pavilion, and it had been snatched away by Lu Chong so that Ren Qingyuan could not use it to deal with him. No matter how the matter was resolved, he would likely have to return it in the end. If the Master-Teacher seal was ruined in his hands, it might really result in a full-blown war with the Master-Teacher Pavilion. While it might seem that his direct disciples had managed to one-up the Master-Teacher Pavilion, the unfortunate truth was that they still came nowhere close to matching it. For countless years, the Master-Teacher Pavilion had been the de facto leader of the entire Master-Teacher continent, and given its accumulation and influence, the couple of them there would still be far from sufficient to oppose it. Since placing it in my storage ring, it has been completely silent. It was only when I was thinking of my student's growth that it suddenly grew warm. Zhongxian pondered for a moment before a thought came to his mind. Could it be that the Pavilion Master Seal is not tamed through blood but through the virtues of a teacher? If that's the case, it should be easier for me tame it if I use the Celestial Master Teacher aura, right? The Celestial Master Teacher was an individual who was recognized by the heavens, such that even Yang Shi dared not pull his weight before one. If the token was really related to the virtues of a teacher, who would be more qualified than a teacher recognized by even the heavens? Let me give it a try. With this thought in mind, he discreetly drove his Celestial Master Teacher aura and infused it into the token. Due to the increment of his soul depth, he commanded a greater control over his aura compared to before. Through careful manipulation, he was able to limit the emanation of his Celestial Master Teacher aura to the area in contact with the Pavilion Master Seal, thus making it nigh impossible for any 9-star Master Teacher or even Yang Shi to detect it. TZZZZZZZ. As soon as the aura came into contact with the Pavilion Master Seal, the latter immediately became even hotter. There was an abrupt burst of wind, and Zhongxian suddenly felt the weight in his hand disappearing entirely. He hurriedly lowered his gaze, and it was indeed the worst-case scenario. The Pavilion Master Seal had vanished without a trace, as if it had never been there in the first place. In an instant, goosebumps rose all over Zhongxian's body, and his vision turned dark as he nearly fainted on the spot. He quickly released his spiritual perception and searched his surroundings, but it was completely empty. There was no sign of the token anywhere at all. It's over. Zhongxian nearly burst into tears. The Pavilion Master Seal was supposed to be some ancient sage artifact forged using Kong Shi's blood essence, and even Yang Shi would have trouble dealing with it, right? Yet, why would it suddenly disappear after he grasped it for a moment, as if an ice cube? Just by its name alone, Pavilion Master Seal, even a fool could figure out its deep significance to the Master Teacher Pavilion. Even when Lu Chong took it, while Ren Qingyuan did panic, he could tell that it was out of apprehension that the Master Teacher Pavilion would be humiliated rather than the worry of never getting it back. But now that the Pavilion Master Seal had disappeared into thin air, how was he supposed to give it back to the other party? While he did cause a huge fuss with the three powers, it was still something that could be resolved eventually. However, if he took away the Pavilion Master Seal as well, he would really be eaten alive. What the heck was this? Hurry up and come out. Stop messing around, Zhongxian muttered anxiously as he searched his surroundings frantically. Soon, his eyes fell on his palm, and he froze. He found that 3 conspicuous crimson droplet imprints had unknowingly appeared on his palm, and it felt like they harnessed some kind of mysterious power. What is this? Zhongxian pondered as he tapped on one of the crimson droplets lightly. Wang. All of a sudden, with a resounding buzz amid a slight moment of disorientation, Zhongxian suddenly found himself being teleported into a void dimension. In this dimension, the concepts of time and space did not seem to exist. All that could be seen around him was a glaring white background and a smiling elder. Zhongxian jolted in astonishment upon seeing the elder's face. There was no way he could not recognize the other party when his sculpture could be found in every single master-teacher pavilion across the continent. Kongsha. At that moment, Kongsha had a gentle and warm look on his face. A hint of agitation could be seen in depths of his eyes as he said, "Finally, after so many years. Pleased to meet you, the new celestial master-teacher." Junior Zhongxian pays respect to Kongsha. Zhongxian clasped his fist and greeted the elder before him. Kongsha stroked his beard and nodded with a kind smile, acknowledging Zhongxian's greeting. "The Pavilion Master Seal is an artifact that I forged with 3 droplets of my blood essence after founding the Master Teacher Pavilion. Only a true celestial Master Teacher will be able to tame it. The fact that you can activate the seal and summon my will proves that you have met this condition. Kongsha, pardon me for saying this, but would you allow me to speak first? There's something urgent that I have to ask you." Seeing that Kongsha was about to jump into his usual long speech once more, Zhongxian immediately interjected into his words and stopped him anxiously. From past experience, he had come to learn that despite Kongsha's great achievements, he was actually a particularly unreliable person. Each and every time that he managed to speak to Kongsha, the other party would vanish right before getting to the main point. If he allowed Kongsha to go first this time, chances were that the same would happen. Having learned his lesson, Zhongxian was determined to go first this time around. "Oh." Noting Zhongxian's anxiety, Kongsha looked at the young man for a moment before raising his hand. "Please, feel free to speak. I am afflicted with the innate fetal poison, and I heard that you underwent the same experience back then as well. May I know how you managed to resolve it?" Zhongxian asked anxiously. "Innate fetal poison?" Kongsha frowned as he examined Zhongxian intently. A moment later, he nodded and said, "It's indeed the innate fetal poison. The poison itself isn't too difficult to cure, but the thing that is hidden inside the innate fetal poison might not be that easy to get rid of," Kongsha said with a grim look on his face. "The thing that is hidden inside the innate fetal poison? What's that?" Zhongxian asked in confusion. He had noticed the innate fetal poison early and used his Heaven's Path Shenqi to have it suppressed in a corner, rendering it immobile. But from Kongsha's tone, it seemed like there was more to the innate fetal poison than met the eye. "There's no point talking about it now, you will come to know of it yourself once you cure yourself of the innate fetal poison. It's not that I want to conceal this matter from you, but there could be adverse consequences if I tell you in advance, so I can only seek your understanding for that. For the time being, let me tell you the method to resolving the innate fetal poison first," Kongsha said. "Please enlighten me." Zhongxian clasped his fist. While he still had some years before the triggering of the innate fetal poison, he still hoped to cure himself of it as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would be unable to shake off the tension coming from the feeling that he was already standing in death's jaws. The innate fetal poison is planted into the body of an expecting body in order to strip a fetus bloodline or to destroy its vitality. As the poison is planted during a fetus developmental phase, it's viewed to be an inherent condition by the body, so ordinary medicines are ineffective on it. There's only one way to resolve it for good, and that's to become a 9-star master teacher and undergo the tribulation of heavenly flames. If you can draw the flames into your body and use the heat to sear the poison aura, you'll be able to resolve the poison easily. Of course, the heavenly flames are a violent and dangerous power to deal with, and the slightest carelessness could result in one being reduced to ash. I had to pay quite a heavy price in order to resolve the innate fetal poison back then, Kongsha explained. The tribulation of heavenly flames. Got it. Thank you, Kongsha. Zhongxian clasped his fists once more. Given that these words had come from Kongsha himself, the tribulation of heavenly flames should be effective. With this, he would finally have a concrete direction to work toward. Given his current strength, he still had some way to go before becoming a 9-star master teacher. Nevertheless, with his rate of cultivation, it should not be too difficult for him to get there before 30. The innate fetal poison only triggers after stepping into your 30s, but still, it would be best for you to resolve it as soon as possible. You have just reached your 20s not too long ago, and if you can resolve it before 25, you can avoid having your strength and potential compromised by it. Kongsha warned grimly. Zhongxian nodded. I understand. Indeed, this matter should be resolved as soon as possible. After wrapping up the current mess that he was in, he should put his attention solely into raising his cultivation and strive for a breakthrough to 9-star master teacher within 2 months. Once he succeeded, everything would swiftly fall into place. Now that we have resolved your problem, I would like to talk to you about the Pavilion Master Seal. This artifact is forged using 3 droplets of my blood essence, and once you tame it, it'll assume the form of droplets on your palm. By touching it, you will be able to. Who? Kongsha's figure suddenly flickered. Will be able to? Zhongxian's heart skipped a beat upon seeing this sight, and he hurriedly urged Kongsha to finish his sentence. Able to. Hula. Reaching his limit, Kongsha's silhouette dissipated into thin air. Hong Long. Zhongxian's mind jolted, and he found himself still sitting right before Zhao Yue. Up in the sky, Wei Ruyan and Yu Ruoxin had barely begun their battle, and everyone was still where he remembered them to be. Nothing seemed to have changed at all. It was as if that conversation had occurred in frozen time. It was fortunate that was the case, or else it could have ended in a disaster for Zhao Yue. That fellow didn't finish his words again. Everyone says that he's the world's teacher, but who in the world disappears halfway through passing down important information? Zhongxian grumbled furiously beneath his breath. How many times had this happened to date? To think that the founder of the Master Teacher Pavilion, a figure respected by so many people, would actually be so unreliable. Forget it. Zhongxian glanced at the crimson droplets on his palm and murmured curiously, he mentioned something about touching it earlier. If I really touch it, what will happen? Chapter 1544. A sudden intruder. When he touched it previously, a Kongsha had popped up. Even if he touched it once more, nothing bad would happen, right? With such a thought in mind, Zhongxian tapped his finger on the crimson droplet once more. Hong Long. As soon as his finger came into contact with the crimson droplet, immense power suddenly began surging into his body. Following which, the crimson droplet that he touched began shrinking at a visible rate before vanishing without a trace. This. Zhongxian narrowed his eyes in astonishment at the changes in his body. His entire body was filled with power, and he felt as if he could command and destroy the world at his will. What strength is this? Zhongxian thought in disbelief. He was a Saint 8 Dan primary stage cultivator, but after taking in the power from the crimson droplet, he found himself far surpassing his limits, reaching a level that was beyond his imagination. Even though he could not clearly assess how powerful he was at the moment, he could feel that he wielded enough power to crush the space around him with ease. Could this be what Ren Qingyuan said earlier about a level that is invincible among those beneath ancient sage? Previously, when Ren Qingyuan first took out the Pavilion Master Seal, he had said that those who were able to tame it would be able to command strength invincible among those beneath ancient sage. He had thought that the other party was simply exaggerating, but to think that it would be true. The crimson droplets in his palm seemed to be the blood essence that Kongsha had infused into the Pavilion Master Seal, and by touching one, he would be able to take in the energy in the blood essence and command devastating power. However, this power ultimately still isn't mine, so there should be a time limit to it, Zhongxian concluded after some thought. As strong as this power was, it was different from cultivation impartation. Rather than saying that it had raised his cultivation, it was more like a cloak of power that he donned temporarily. For a set amount of time, he would wield tremendous power. However, as time passed, the power would swiftly diminish, and once it had been depleted, he would return to how he originally was. 3 crimson droplets, that should mean that I can use this ability thrice. Having made sense of the matter, Zhongxian finally understood what Kongsha wanted to say before disappearing. Most likely, Kongsha was going to explain how the Pavilion Master Seal worked, but his unexpected question about the innate fetal poison resulted in him not having enough time to talk about the matter. No matter how powerful one was, as long as one successfully tamed the Pavilion Master Seal, one would have 3 opportunities to wield strength invincible beneath ancient sage. As expected of the world's teacher, the artifacts that he created were indeed on a whole new level. No matter what kind of mystical effects an artifact could have, nothing was safer than raw power. With this trump card in his possession, his safety would be assured. With such strength at my disposal, the Zhong clan, the Glacier Plain Court, and the Sanctum of Sages won't pose a threat to me anymore, Zhongxian thought with a soft chuckle. He had still been wondering how he should resolve the problem before him, but with such strength at his disposal, he had nothing to fear anymore. In the worst-case scenario, he would just have to force all of them to submit to him. However, I still need to resolve the problem with Zhao Yue's meridians first. As excited as Zhongxian was, he knew that his priority should be the tightly wrapped young lady before him. He continued to forge the pathways for Zhao Yue's meridians, but in the midst of doing so, he realized that due to the rise in his strength, he was able to control his zhenqi more finely, allowing him to hasten the process significantly. Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. It should have taken at least 2 more hours, but with this, I should be able to complete it within 10 minutes. While Zhongxian was treating Zhao Yue, the battle in the sky came to an end as well. Yu Ruoxin's face had turned completely black from poison, and her convulsing body plummeted to the ground. Be it in terms of poison art or even just raw power, she was far from a match for Wei Ruyan. In fact, had it not been for Zhongxian instructing his students not to kill anyone, she would have already been dead by now. Seeing that her junior, Wei Ruyan, had dealt with one of the culprits, Wang Ying turned to Zhonshi and said, "If I recall correctly, Zhonshi, you issued an instruction to have my teacher arrested and killed as well, right? I reckon that you wouldn't like it if my other juniors such as Zheng Yang and Wei Ruyan were to challenge you. So, you won't turn down a fight from a spirit awakener like me, right?" Zhonshi's face twitched in fright upon hearing those words. Considering how Zheng Yang and Wei Ruyan were able to stand squarely against Ren Qingyuan, he would indeed stand no chance against those two monsters. However, the young lady in front of him was not a weakling either. She was the head of the Spirit Awakener Guild, and it would be foolish to underestimate the means that she had at her disposal. If you are unwilling to fight, there's another way out of this. Apologize to my teacher now and retract your orders. Wang Ying harumphed coldly with a fling of her sleeves. Apologize? That's impossible. Zhonsha roared resolutely. Even if I die, I won't stand for anyone humiliating the Sanctum of Sages. I see. I'll fulfill your wish for a valiant death then. Seeing that the other party's mind was set, Wang Ying could not be bothered to waste her breath anymore. She raised her palm, and one of the master-teacher pavilions immediately charged toward Zhonsha. Hula! A huge gale roared under the master-teacher pavilion's charge. The charge of something as colossal as an entire master-teacher pavilion was a rather imposing sight. Zhonsha stood his ground and gathered his zhenqi to form an 8-meter-large palm print, and he thrust it right into the charging master-teacher pavilion. Catcher! The palm strike burst right through the master-teacher pavilion, causing it to collapse entirely. However, Zhonsha was also forced to retreat under the impact as well. Stop it. That's our Empire Alliance Master-Teacher Pavilion, an 8-star Master-Teacher yelled in despair by the side. If you want to fight, do it somewhere else. Why do you have to use our buildings and property as collateral damage? I can't care that much at this point, Zhonsha replied helplessly as he leaped forward and dashed for Wang Ying. Kill a cavalry by shooting down its horse, destroy a band of thieves by nabbing its leader. If the situation continued, it would only be a matter of time before he was worn down by the endless assault of buildings. In order to get out of this quandary, he would have to nab Wang Ying first. Do you really think that my strength only comes from my enchantments? Wang Ying scoffed as she looked at Zhonshi's swiftly approaching figure. Unlike Zheng Yang and Wei Ruyan, she had not met with any fortuitous encounters nor did she possess a unique constitution, but as the leader of the Spirit Awakener Guild, she had amassed the strength of her predecessors. No longer was she that naive and powerless girl of the past. She raised her hand and thrust her palm forward. Her movements were not fast, but they carried fearsome might. In the midst of his charge, Zhonsha suddenly felt a shudder run down his spine. Knowing that he would not be able to withstand the attack head-on, he quickly leaped upward. But following his movement, he suddenly found his surroundings turning dark. Turning his gaze upward, he saw a massive puppet towering above him, and it was in the midst of swinging its fist toward him. It's the guardian artifact of the Spirit Awakener Guild, the Empyrean puppet. Ren Qingyuan bellowed in shock. Hula! Unfortunately, His warning came too late. There was no way that Zhonshu could avoid the massive fist of the Empyrean puppet anymore. Once it struck him, even though he was a Saint 9 Dan primary stage expert, he would be inflicted with severe injuries that would leave him incapacitated for months on end. At that crucial moment, a sharp, cold glint flashed across the sky, deflecting the puppet's fist, accompanied by an imposing voice. Stop. Chapter 1545. A duel with the sword Sane. That sword Qi was powerful and magnificent, carrying a wholesome intent to it. Even though it had come from afar, it did not seem to be restricted by the concept of time. It seemed to have abruptly materialized right before the puppet's fist, thus saving Zhonshu in the nick of time. That was a full-might attack from the Empyrean puppet, yet it had easily been deflected by the other party. An expert. Wang Ying narrowed her eyes warily. She hurriedly turned her gaze in the direction that the sword Qi had originated from. At the same time, Zheng Yang also tightened his grasp on his spear, prepared to make a move at any moment. To be able to deflect Wang Ying's attack from such a long distance away, the person's strength was at least on par with Ren Qingyuan's. In fact, in the field of swordsmanship, that person might even have surpassed Ren Qingyuan. It's the speed sword quintessence. Zhong Xian, who was still in the midst of reconstructing Zhao Yue's meridians, suddenly spoke up at this point. With a nod, he answered the doubt that was in everyone's mind. It's probably the head of the Zhong clan, the father of the young prodigy, Sword Saint Xing. He had already learned the essence of the Zhong clan swordsmanship back in the Zhong clan, and he knew its capabilities very well. It was capable of allowing one's sword Qi to break free from the restraints of time and reach one's opponents in an instant. However, the only one who could pull off such fine control of it even from a long distance away was the legendary head of the Zhong clan, Sword Saint Xing. I was intending to challenge him back when I was still at the Zhong clan, but he was nowhere to be seen. Since he's here, it's a good opportunity to see if he's really as strong as the others make him out to be, Zhong Xian thought with a smile. During his trip to the Zhong clan, he had managed to make an appointment to duel with Sword Saint Xing, but in the end, he did not get to meet the other party. Who could have thought that they would come by one another here? Since that was the case, he could use the other party as a sparring partner to try out his newfound strength while exacting vengeance for Elder Jian. More importantly, he would make it clear to the other party that if his son wanted to marry Luo Ruoxin, he would have to get past him first. Hula. Barely after those thoughts surfaced in his head, the space ahead of him suddenly rippled, and two figures came into appearance, a middle-aged man and a middle-aged lady. They were the couple who had been going around in search of their son, Sword Saint Xing and Sword Saint Meng. Those two had been going in the opposite direction from the Empire Alliance when they received Yangshu's message and rushed over. Clan head. Upon seeing the two of them, Zhong Wuheng immediately rushed up to them in agitation, as if he was looking at his savior. First Elder, what happened to you? Sword Saint Xing's eyebrows twitched in astonishment. As the number one clan on the Master Teacher continent, even the Master Teacher Pavilion would have tread carefully around the Zhong clan. Yet, for its first elder to be pummeled to such a state, not sparing any heed for the Zhong clan's dignity at all. Just who could the culprit be? It's all because of that darned Zhong Xian and his students. Zhong Wuheng spat as he pointed at the young lad below. Clan head, you must redress my grievances. Otherwise, what will others think of our Zhong clan? If we don't deal with this promptly, we'll become the laughingstock of the Master Teacher continent. Zhong Xian. Upon hearing Zhong Wuheng's words, Sword Saint Meng immediately followed the first elder's finger, and soon after, a young man gazing in her direction appeared in her field of vision. In that instant, her body began shuddering uncontrollably. It must be him. Dear, I am certain about it, it must be him. Sword Saint Meng turned to her husband and exclaimed passionately through Zhenqi telepathy. Even she had no idea why she was so certain that the young man before her was her son. She was aware that her claims were unfounded, but she had always trusted her intuition, and she could feel an inexplicable connection with the young man. Fearing that his wife might run amok, Sword Saint Xing hurriedly grabbed her hand and squeezed it. Calm down, dear. As long as he's our son, we'll surely be able to reunite with him today. He had no idea what was going on, but given the fact the first elder could still be pummeled to such a state despite the presence of so many 9-star master teachers, it would appear that Zhong Xian was no ordinary figure. It was one thing if the other party was really their son, but if he was not their son and they still rushed over to acknowledge him, that would really make things awkward. In the first place, it was already a huge embarrassment for the Zhong clan to be forced to such a position. If they made a mistake at this point, the Zhong clan's reputation might really be lost for good. Seeing right through her husband's concerns, Sword Saint Meng bellowed telepathically with gritted teeth, "Are you doubting my words? There's no way I would fail to recognize my own son. Even if he has matured, my blood still flows in his veins. I know what you are feeling. As much as he's your son, he's my son as well. You are anxious to reunite with him, but so am I. However, it's precisely at a time like this that we must remain calm and ensure nothing goes wrong. Isn't there a scarlet birthmark on our child's bottom? I'll find an excuse to ask about it later on, and as long as we can verify that, we'll reunite with him right away, all right?" Sword Saint Xing appeased his wife. Even though their son was a carnate saint, that did not change the fact that he had only been an infant when he left their side. Furthermore, the other party seemed to have a slightly different soul aura from their son, which made it more important to verify the matter. And the easiest and least intrusive method to do so was through his birthmark. All parts of a person's body could change over time, but one's birthmarks would never disappear. Very well. Knowing that there was some sense in what Sword Saint Xing was saying, Sword Saint Meng nodded and composed herself. Seeing how the couple had been mumbling between themselves intimately ever since arriving, Zheng Yang's eyebrows shot up, and he walked forward. "Are you the head of the Zhong clan? You came at the perfect time. I haven't had a chance to make a move yet, so do you want to be my opponent?" Fearing that Sword Saint Xing would not recognize the young man, Zhong Wuheng quickly reported telepathically, "That young man is Zhong Xian's student, as well as the progeny of combat, Zhang Yang. So, you are the progeny of combat, Zhang Yang. I have long heard your name, but I didn't think that you would be Zhong Shi's student." Sword Saint Xing clasped his fist and greeted the young man. "Don't bother wasting your breath on CR*P like that. You just have to say whether you wish to fight or not. Your Zhong clan has humiliated my teacher, but your first elder still refuses to apologize for his misdeeds. If you don't wish to have a duel with me, I'm willing to drop the matter at an apology from you as well." Zheng Yang looked at Sword Saint Xing haughtily as he raised his spear imposingly, causing the air to moan under the pressure of his movement. He knew that Sword Saint Xing was a formidable expert who had made his name ages ago, but as the progeny of combat, he had already resolved himself not to back down from any opponent. Courage and tenacity would be his strongest weapons. Since he had gone there to vent his teacher's anger, he would have to make sure to beat the three powers into submission so that they would not dare utter another word. "I'm fine with having a duel with you as well, but..." Sword Saint Xing paused for a moment as a smile surfaced on his lips. "I happen to have an appointment for a duel with your teacher. Since the both of us are here, I would rather settle that matter first before dealing with whatever you have for me. Do you think that any random person on the street is qualified to duel with my esteemed teacher?" Zheng Yang harumphed. "Of course, if you can get past me, there will be nothing I can say about you challenging my teacher, but if you can't, just know that I won't stop until you finally apologize. Your words do make sense. It's perfectly normal for a student to stand up on his teacher's behalf, and there's nothing I can say about it," Sword Saint Xing said. "However, the perpetrator behind the grudge with the Zhong clan is your teacher, and only when he resolves it personally can others accept the outcome. As a student, don't you think that it might be too disrespectful of you to meddle in every single one of your teacher's affairs? If word spreads, people will think that the matter was resolved only because Zhong Shi took in a good student, and that wouldn't look too good, right?" That. Zheng Yang was put at a loss for words. His mind had been preoccupied with how he could vent his teacher's anger, so he had not thought too deeply about the possible implications for his teacher as a result of his actions. He hated to admit it, but Sword Saint Xing was right. Of course, there was no issue with a student stepping forward to protect their teacher, but if they went overboard, it would make the teacher appear incompetent instead. And incompetence was one word that no master teacher would ever want their name to be associated with. "Teacher, I Realizing all of these, Zheng Yang turned to his teacher in seek of his opinion, only to see the latter chuckling softly. It's fine, I can handle this matter. It's true that I had an appointment for a duel with the head of the Zhong clan, and since he wishes to proceed with it, I'm more than willing to entertain him. Chapter 1546 Zhongxian offers his pointers. 1 Teacher, your current cultivation realm. Zheng Yang exclaimed anxiously. His teacher was only at Dimension Sundering Realm primary stage, whereas the fact that the head of the Zhong clan was able to execute a burst of sword qi to deflect Wang Ying's puppet from such a long distance away showed that his cultivation was surely above Saint Nine Dan. Considering the huge disparity in their cultivation, how were they supposed to fight with one another? Making use of the crimson droplets formed from the pavilion master seal, Zhongxian currently wielded strength far beyond his limits, but due to his high soul depth, the nature of the heaven's pathshanqi, and the fact that he had not showcased it at all, not even Zheng Yang was aware of the massive change in his teacher's fighting prowess over the past few seconds. Knowing what Zheng Yang was worried about, Sword Saint Xing added with a smile, I can lower my cultivation to Zhongshi's level, and it'll only be a simple duel of swordsmanship, so you can rest assured that I won't injure your teacher. If I lose, I'll apologize to you on behalf of the Zhong clan and not pursue everything that happened before. However, if I win, I'll have to ask Zhongshe to abide by the agreement that we made previously. When Zhongxian challenged Sword Saint Xing to a duel back then, he had promised that he would join the Zhong clan as an elder if he lost the duel. Of course, I won't renege on my promise. Zhongxian nodded. However, since it's a duel, I won't take advantage of you either. There's no need for you to suppress your cultivation. Just bring forth your strongest move against me. You want me to use my strongest move against you? Sword Saint Xing was taken aback. Given his cultivation realm, if he used his strongest move, even Pavilion Master Ren Qingyuan would have trouble dealing with it. Did the Dimension Sundering Realm primary stage young man really mean the words that he said? Has that fellow gone mad? Ren Qingyuan, Zhong Wuheng, and the others were perplexed by Zhongxian's words as well. They had seen the young man's strength earlier, and other than his many means and powerful students, there was really nothing spectacular about him at all. To actually ask Sword Saint Xing to use his strongest move against him without suppressing his cultivation, that was as good as asking to be killed. That's right. Zhongxian nodded. On top of that, I'll sit here and fight you with a single hand. If my body moves in the slightest or my other hand is utilized, I'll admit my defeat. Sword Saint Xing's face twitched uncontrollably upon hearing those words. He had 2 reasons for challenging Zhongxian to a fight. Firstly, he wanted to check if the young man was his son. Secondly, he could better resolve the enmity between the young man and the Zhong clan through this manner, appeasing the elders of the Zhong clan while carefully controlling his strength to ensure that the young man did not sustain any grievous wounds. It was one thing for the young man not to reciprocate his goodwill, but to utter such arrogant words on top of that. He sure is like you. Just as Sword Saint Xing was just about to explode from rage, he suddenly heard his wife's voice in his ears, and his body twitched in horror. Am I really that arrogant? You were even more arrogant than him when you were younger. Sword Saint Meng replied with a smile. This. Sword Saint Xing scratched his head before looking at Zhongxian helplessly. All right then. Since that's your request, I'll do just that. After saying those words, he descended from the sky to the ground. But the moment that his foot came into contact with the ground, the telepathic voice of his wife echoed in his mind. If you so much harm a single strand of hair on my son, do not dream of getting into my bed in the future. Sword Saint Xing staggered upon hearing those words, and he nearly burst into tears. Just what have I done so wrong to warrant such a fate? Could the young man have expected this outcome when he proposed to face his attack with one hand while sitting on the ground? Teacher. In contrast to Sword Saint Xing's tearfulness, Zheng Yang, Wei Ruyan, and the others directed worried gazes at Zhongxian. Each of them had a fortuitous encounter of their own that had allowed them to improve swiftly. However, their teacher had not been lucky enough to have such an encounter, so his cultivation had ended up lagging behind them at Dimension Sundering Realm primary stage. With his current strength, there was no way that he could stand a chance against the full-powered Sword Saint Xing. There was absolutely zero chance of victory at all. Don't worry. When has our teacher waged a war that isn't confident of winning? Since our teacher has said such words, he definitely has a plan in mind, Yuan Dao said with a smile. I guess that's true. Zheng Yang pondered for a moment before nodding. Wei Ruyan had come under Zhong Xian's lineage a little late, so she was unaware of many of his past exploits. Nevertheless, she still had a rough grasp of the latter's temperament and character. If there was one thing that she was certain about, this teacher of hers would never take the short end of a stick. Those who dared challenge him would only end up tragically defeated. Wait a moment. Have any of you realized that our teacher's aura seemed to have changed? Wang Ying suddenly spoke up. I could still roughly gauge the depth of his strength earlier, but right now, no matter how I look at him, it's like staring into an endless ocean, unable to see the end of it no matter how one squints. Those words prompted Zheng Yang, Wei Ruyan, and the others to take a good look at their teacher once more, and indeed, there were some significant changes with the latter. Even though he was still seated on the spot, the energy within his body appeared to have been amplified many times over, reaching a level that even they could not accurately gauge anymore. Our teacher might have made a breakthrough again, Lu Chong suggested uncertainly. As a soul oracle, his sensitivity to his environment was much higher than the others. Just a moment ago, his teacher had still been at a level that he could defeat easily, but right now, just by standing in the vicinity of his teacher, he felt a powerful pressure pressing down on him, suffocating him. He had no idea just what could induce such a massive change in his teacher within such a short period of time, but considering that it was his teacher whom they were talking about, even the impossible did not seem too impossible anymore. Seeing that his teacher was prepared, Zheng Yang was finally able to put down the worries in his heart. With a light chuckle, he ushered the others to the side and said, since that's the case, there's no need for us to worry then. Let's just sit back and watch our teacher teach Sword Saint Xing a lesson. Remembering dearly his wife's threat, Sword Saint Xing took a deep breath before he flicked his wrist and whipped out his sword. Make your move. I fear that I might accidentally injure you if I wield my sword. Since it's a friendly duel, I'll pass on using my sword. Zhong Xian glanced at Sword Saint Xing and spoke composedly. You aren't going to wield a sword? How are you intend to fight then? In that moment, Sword Saint Xing felt like clawing his hair out. There was really no way to communicate with such arrogant fools. Fine, he admitted that he had been pretty egoistical when he was younger, often trying to humble brag whenever the opportunity arose. However, even he had not reached this level of boastfulness before. It was almost as if the young man was trying to slap his face with his every sentence. Anyone else in his shoes would have already turned irrational from rage at this point, but somehow, toward the young man sitting before him, he could not get angry even if he wanted to. He still was not too sure whether the young man was truly his son or not, but he could grasp what his wife was saying. It was hard to put it into words, but it felt like there was an inseverable connection between him and the young man. I'll just fight you like this. Oblivious to the thoughts running through Sword Saint Xing's mind, Zhong Xian flicked his finger, and a surge of sword qi exactly 3 kai long gathered at the tip of his finger, emanating a cold glint. Very well then, do whatever pleases you. Just try to avoid getting hurt, alright? It was hard to tell if it was out of rage or frustration, but Sword Saint Xing heaved a deep sigh. Following which, he flicked his sword and pierced it right toward Zhong Xian. He had only used 1/10 of his might, but he did not hold back on his sword intent at all. The moment that the sword stabbed forth, it transcended through space and appeared right in front of Zhong Xian's glabella the next moment. Not bad, I have to say that your swordsmanship is quite decent. Zhong Xian chuckled softly. As expected of the #1 expert of the Zhong clan swordsmanship. As soon as he made his move, it was immediately apparent that his swordsmanship had reached a much higher level than Zhong Shu and the others. Without bothering to dodge, Zhong Xian remained seated on the spot. He continued to reconstruct Zhao Yue's meridians with his left hand while raising his right hand and tapping the space in front of him. A burst of sword qi shot forth from his fingertip, and it transcended the limitations of space in an instant. Be it the initiation move, the intent, or the release of the technique, the sword art that Zhong Xian had just executed was completely identical to that of Sword Saint Xing. If the others were not aware of the hostile relationship between Zhong Xian and the Zhong clan, they would have thought that they were brothers from the same lineage sparring with one another. However, even though it was the exact same move, Zhongxian's attack managed to reach its target first despite its later release. From the looks of it, Sword Saint Xing's swordsmanship would be undone before it could push even the slightest centimeter further. This. Sword Saint Xing's body recoiled in astonishment at the unexpected turn in events as he gasped in disbelief. How is this possible? Chapter 1547 Zhongxian offers his pointers to Sword Saint Xing's understanding of the Zhong clan's swordsmanship had already reached an inconceivable level. Every subtle movement that he made was in alignment with the essence of the speed sword quintessence, yet the young man was still able to get to him faster despite releasing his sword art later. Not only so, the young man's strength had also far surpassed his. If he failed to dodge this move, the young man would swiftly nullify any strength that he commanded, such that his sword would not be able to deal any damage even if it fell on the young man's body. Humph! Knowing that he was facing a true expert, Sword Saint Xing decisively gave up on the idea of going easy on the young man. He took a deep breath before sliding his feet half a step back. After which, his sword curved in a unique and bizarre trajectory, forcefully transforming a pierce into a hack. You are going to the extent of executing the dragon-slaying sword? You! Upon seeing the move that her husband had executed, Sword Saint Meng nearly exploded on the spot. If there was anyone in this world who knew Sword Saint Xing the best, it was indubitably her. The two of them had practiced the dragon-slaying sword for quite some time before they had been able to achieve some level of accomplishment in the sword art. While it was not the strongest sword art that they had, the might that it commanded was mind-boggling. Even Ren Qingyuan would fluster in its face. To execute such a move against him barely after the battle had started, didn't I tell you to go easy on him? Is that how you take my instructions? Sword Saint Meng gnashed her teeth furiously. If I allow you to even come close to my bed, I'll write my surname upside down from this day forth. You reacted faster than I thought. While Zhongxian had managed to outdo the head of the Zhong clan at the first encounter, he had to admit that the other party was a pretty formidable opponent. The other party was actually able to instantaneously determine that his defense would arrive faster than his offense, and he decisively changed his assault and launched a counterattack. Chuckling softly, Zhongxian raised his right hand once more and tapped his finger forward. It was the same move as before, however, this time, the target was not Sword Saint Xing's glabella but his shoulder. Under normal circumstances, Sword Saint Xing's strike would have struck down on Zhongxian's head first due to the longer distance from Zhongxian's finger to Sword Saint Xing's shoulder. However, from the trajectory of his hack, if Sword Saint Xing continued with his offense, his wrist would cross paths with Zhongxian's burst of sword qi. With the sharpness of his sword qi, there was no doubt that Sword Saint Xing's wrist would be severed before his sword could manage to strike down on Zhongxian's head. Sword Saint Xing's face twitched upon realizing this fact, and his face turned even more severe than before. He had thought that given the disparity in their cultivation, he should be able to defeat the young man easily. Who would have thought that even when he utilized his full strength, he would still be unable to outdo the young man? The young man might have been young, but his eyes seemed to see right through his sword arts and maneuvers. Each and every time, the young man was able to read his movements and seal his offense swiftly. Not only so, the worst thing was that the other party was still using the exact same move. That move was the most basic sword art of the Zhong clan swordsmanship, and it was known as the probing sword. Just as the name suggested, the purpose of this was to probe the other party's moves and gauge the depth of the other party's strength before launching a decisive counterattack at the critical moment. Yet, using such a basic move, the young man had actually managed to seal off his offense twice. Just how deep was his mastery in swordsmanship? I don't believe this. Sword Saint Xing knew that his wrist would be sliced right off if he forcefully pushed on with his current assault, so he took half a step back and flicked his sword once more. In an instant, innumerable cold glints flashed across Zhongxian's eyes, reminiscent of the countless stars in the sky, and they darted right for Zhongxian's eyes. Falling Sword of Starry Sky. This was a sword art that had taken him 3 years to create. It still was not his strongest move, but it was at least 2 times stronger than the dragon-slaying sword that he had executed previously. This move consisted of countless pierces from differing directions, which made it extremely difficult to deal with. On top of that, it also had a beguiling effect on one's mind and soul. The first time that he had executed it, even Sword Saint Meng had suffered a bit under its incredible prowess. Since his first two moves had been foiled, Sword Saint Xing had no intention of holding back anymore. As soon as the attack was executed, Zhong Xian felt as if he was standing amid countless stars. His surroundings seemed to have emptied out, and it felt as if he was standing in the midst of a void devoid of the concepts of time and space. In such a state, it was difficult for him to even perceive his directions clearly, let alone determine where the attacks were coming from. To make an analogy, it was similar to how a celestial body looked the exact same no matter how fast it was approaching one, making it hard to gauge its exact distance away from one using one's eyes. This was currently the kind of attack that Zhong Xian was facing. In the face of the sword art, he found himself unable to accurately perceive how far he was from the sword pierces, and that was something extremely dangerous in battle. Teacher. Zheng Yang grasped onto his spear tightly as cold sweat trickled down his body. Even he could not say for sure if he would be able to overcome that sword with his current strength. Would his teacher be in danger then? Before the many anxious gazes centered on him, Zhong Xian finally moved. No different from his previous movements, he executed another probing sword right toward Sword Saint Xinghuala. The sword chi flew forth, but just when it was some distance from reaching its target, it suddenly seemed to have struck something. Following which, all of the stars collapsed, and the phenomenon that the sword art had created vanished without a trace. Deng 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 deng. Sword Saint Xing felt his blood churning furiously as he retreated 8 steps, and his widened eyes stared intently at Zhong Xian in disbelief and shock. The probing sword was actually able to overcome my falling sword of starry sky. How is this possible? While this move was not the strongest sword art that he had cultivated, its might was still not to be underestimated. He could not accept the fact that his falling sword of starry sky could actually be overcome by such a simple technique. It was no different from a mortal battle technique overpowering a saint battle technique. Hee. Zhong Xian chuckled softly. With the voice of a wise elder, he said, "The sword is the extension of one's strength. As long as one is able to bring it to a certain point at a certain moment, it will be able to defeat any enemy. Sword arts are auxiliary maneuvers that serve to achieve that aim." The probing sword might be the simplest move in the Zhong clan's swordsmanship, but it's precisely due to its simplicity that it's flexible enough to be used in many unpredictable situations. In the hands of an expert, its strength can be truly fearsome. It's similar to a drunkard holding a sword, hacking around randomly. There might not be any order of any sort to it, but it's fearsome precisely because of its unpredictable nature. It's impossible to fathom the intention of the attacker, along with when and where the next attack will land. Of course, just the randomness and unpredictability of one's offense isn't enough. The reason why a cultivator is able to curb an armed drunkard easily is due to the lack of purpose in his offense. Only when one could grasp the enemy's intents and attack trajectory would one be able to launch attacks purposefully to curb the enemy's offense. I have to admit that your fallen sword of starry sky is formidable. It locks onto its target's mind, spirit, and psyche, making it difficult to escape from it. However, in order to lock onto the target's mind, spirit, and psyche, there must be some kind of intermediary to establish a connection, and that intermediary is the very opening in your move. My counterattack was simple, but it accurately struck the intermediary. Given so, it's inevitable that your sword art would collapse altogether. To make an analogy, this is similar to the concept of bringing down a fortress. It might seem impregnable on the surface, but as long as one strikes it at its crux, one can easily bring an entire fortress to the ground. Simplicity in one's swordsmanship might not necessarily be a bad thing. If utilized well in the right manner, it can achieve spectacular results. At this point, Zhong Xian turned to Sword Saint Xing and sighed deeply before saying, "Sword Saint Xing, it's not that I want to lecture you, but you are overly obsessed with the form and movement of your sword, to the extent that you've lost sight of what swordsmanship truly is." Sword Saint Xing's face reddened. As one of the strongest sword practitioners in the world, he had actually ended up being lectured by a young man who could very well be his child. His face immediately burned bright red from embarrassment. There's no need to be embarrassed by that. It's already very rare for someone of our age to be able to come up with such a sword art and sword intent. Zhong Xian consoled with a smile. If you are willing to learn, I can offer you some pointers in your swordsmanship so that you can further your skills. Chapter 1548 admits defy. Hearing Zhong Xian's words, Sword Saint Meng began trembling uncontrollably, and eventually, she could not hold herself back and burst into hearty laughter. As expected of her son, he sure was gutsy. Well said, she shouted. Her husband had grown too arrogant from being in a high position for too long. For some reason, she felt exceptionally refreshed to see him getting pummeled by their son. Hearing Sword Saint Meng's words, many of the 9-star master teachers and the experts of the Zhong clan exchanged glances. Just whose side was the matriarch of the Zhong clan on? Wei Ruyan, Wang Ying, and the others were dumbfounded as well. Despite seeing her husband getting pummeled and lectured, she was still able to cheer the other party on so happily. Those of the Zhong clan sure were peculiar. Sword Saint Xing looked at his wife, who was laughing so hard that she seemed about to fall from the sky, before turning his sight to the young man, who was staring at him earnestly, and he suddenly felt so frustrated that he could spurt blood. His complexion was as poor as it could be. Were it not for his cultured upbringing, he would have been hurling vulgarities at this moment. It just so happens that my mastery of swordsmanship surpasses yours a little, and I wish to trade some insights with you. There's no need to get too nervous, Zhong Xian said. There's no need for that. Sword Saint Xing flung his sleeves and harumphed. We can trade insights after the duel is over. I still have another move here, and if you can block it, I'll consider it your victory. Hula. Without waiting for the other party to respond, Sword Saint Xing harumphed coldly and thrust his sword straight forward. On the other hand, Zhong Xian shook his head and tapped his finger over once more. It was still the same probing sword, but this time, his sword chi was much sharper than before. It pierced right through space as soon as it appeared, creating a pitch-black trail along the path of its movement. Is that dimension-severing sword chi? To be able to cleave space with his sword chi. But that's an ability that only the strongest great sages possess. Isn't he only in the dimension-sundering realm? How is he that powerful? The expressions of all those present warped in shock. This was especially so for Zhong Wuheng, Yu Ruoxin, and the others. Their faces had turned ghastly white in disbelief. All along, they had attributed the damage that Zhong Xian had caused due to his ability to command lightning tribulation. His strength should have been nothing of concern to them at all. When in the world did he become so powerful? Had they known in advance, they would have simply left the matter be instead of causing such a huge fuss only to embarrass themselves. This. Ren Qingyuan also widened his eyes in horror. If he had known that Zhong Xian was such a powerful master teacher, he never would have issued an arrest warrant on him. Just the ability to pull off dimension-severing sword chi meant that the strength that Zhong Xian wielded was already comparable to the Grand Elders, and even as the deputy pavilion master, he had no right to deal with a master teacher of that caliber. It's no wonder he was able to groom so many formidable students. Ren Qingyuan swallowed a mouthful of saliva as he turned his gaze to Zheng Yang and the others. However, he swiftly noticed something peculiar among the group of students. There was completely no sign of surprise on their faces, as if Zhong Xian's abrupt power growth was perfectly normal. It was almost as if they felt that it was only a given for Zhong Xian to be that powerful. Monsters. Those are really a bunch of monsters. Ren Qingyuan thought as his body shuddered in fear. Huala. Before everyone's shocked gaze, Zhong Xian's sword chi finally arrived before Sword Saint Xing. Sword Saint Xing did not seem to be intending to go down without a fight either. He flicked his sword, and with a silver streak of light, it flew right for Zhong Xian's throat. 3 swords of the Grim Reaper. Upon seeing that move, Sword Saint Meng widened her eyes in horror. The 3 swords of the Grim Reaper was the ultimate technique that she and Sword Saint Xing had cultivated for many years in order to serve as their ultimate trump card, only to free themselves from the direst of situations. So far, they had not been cornered to the point where they had to use it, but to think that its first use would actually be on their son. Sword Saint Meng immediately whipped out her sword and prepared to dash forward to save her son. However, At that moment, she saw a smile creeping onto the edges of the young man's lips, and he calmly opened his mouth to speak. Stop. Voila. Everything in the surroundings seemed to come to a halt along with his word. The incomparably sharp sword that Sword Saint Xing was dragging toward Zhong Xian's neck abruptly froze in midair, as if a fish frozen within a block of ice. Go. With another calm word, the sword chi gathered at Zhong Xian's fingertip shot outward, and the three swords of the Grim Reaper immediately unraveled. At the same time, Sword Saint Xing sustained a heavy blow, and he was forced to retreat several steps. Why you? Was that dimension-sealing diction? Sword Saint Xing widened his eyes in shock as his body trembled in fear. Only a demonic tunist who had refined their art to the level of an ancient sage should be able to wield the ability to seal space at their word. No one in the demonic tunist guild had achieved it in countless millenniums, yet Zhong Xian had actually managed to pull it off. How could that be possible? That isn't exactly dimension-sealing diction. It just happens that your state of mind is a little weak, so I'm able to easily influence you with my words and force you to stop driving your zhengqi, Zhong Xian said. He might have wielded powers invincible beneath ancient sage after taming the pavilion master seal, but it was still beyond his means to execute the demonic tunist's dimension-sealing diction. The reason he could get the other party to stop was through his impartation of heaven's will, augmented by his exceptionally high soul depth and heart of teacher, thus compelling Sword Saint Xing to follow his bidding without any questions asked. In truth, even if he did not use this move, given his current strength, he would still have been able to defeat Sword Saint Xing with ease. However, this was the method that would bring the most shock to the crowd, and knowing that there was a limit to the duration of the droplet of power, this was what he needed as well. Incredible. Incredible. Sword Saint Xing pondered for a moment before making sense of what had happened. His eyes glowed in agitation as he turned his gaze to the young man. The fury in his eyes had subsided, and replacing it was pride and delight instead. A huge commotion had occurred when his son was born, and that was more than enough to tell anyone of the extraordinary fate that had lain ahead of his son. However, several unfortunate events had occurred afterward, and he had thought that his son's talents would forever be buried in the dust, never to shine brightly. Who would have thought that when they met once more, his son would be stronger and more talented than he had expected? There's no need to test him out anymore, he's definitely my son. Only my son could wield such capabilities and means. This thought sent surges of exhilaration through Sword Saint Xing's veins, and he began laughing heartily. When he finally calmed down once more, he looked at Zhong Xian and said, "Since you were able to overcome even my strongest three swords of the Grim Reaper, I'll admit defeat." You're going to admit defeat? Zhong Xian was taken aback. Going by previous scripts, the opponent should have continued provoking him out of concern for their dignity and reputation, all the way till they were severely wounded and incapacitated. He did not think that Sword Saint Xing would give up so easily. This was a matter that concerned the entire Zhong clan, but Sword Saint Xing was still able to remain rational and not allow the weight of his responsibility to blind himself. This gave Zhong Xian a very favorable impression of him. I would only embarrass myself further at this point. Since that's the case, I might as well admit defeat. Sword Saint Xing laughed. As one of top sword practitioners on the master-teacher continent, his pride would not allow him to lose to others. However, if it was his own son, he would be more than delighted to do so. But clan head. By the side, Zhong Wuheng did not expect such an outcome, and a look of panic surfaced on his face. Sword Saint Xing's admittance of defeat meant that not only would the Zhong clan have to drop all charges against the young man, it would even have to apologize to him. As the #1 sage clan with a heritage that could be traced back many millenniums, it had never suffered such humiliation before. I know what you want to say, but my decision is the clan's decision. Nothing you say will change anything. Sword Saint Xing waved his hand to stop the first elder from speaking anymore. After which, he turned his sight back to Zhong Xian and hesitated for a moment before switching over to zhengqi telepathy. Zhongsha, there's something that I would like to ask you. Sword Saint Xing, feel free to ask. If it's something I can speak of, I'll answer your doubt. Zhong Xian nodded. To be willing to take the initiative to admit defeat and even shoot down Zhong Wuheng's words. Zhong Xian's impression of him was getting more and more favorable. It's like this. Sword Saint Xing stared at him with a slightly awkward and nervous look as he asked, "Is there a scarlet birthmark on your bottom?" Chapter 1549 Zhongxian is my son, birthmark? On my bottom? Zhongxian was taken aback. After transcending over to this world, he had washed his body innumerable times, and he had spent some time examining and learning his body before. Indeed, there was a scarlet birthmark on his bottom, but this should have been something that only he would know of. How would this middle-aged man before him know about it? Zhongxian eyed the middle-aged man before him suspiciously. Could he possess some ability similar to the Library of Heaven's Path that would allow him to look at his opponent's body? But having a birthmark was not a flaw, so it would be impossible for the Library of Heaven's Path to detect it. Moreover, he possessed the discarnate constitution of divination, so if by any chance any seers tried to divine his body, they would not be able to find anything at all. Thinking again, it was not that rare for a person to have a birthmark on the bottom either, right? Zhongxian could not help but look at Sword Saint Xing doubtfully, uncomprehending of the intention behind his question. Seeing the implicit admittance from Zhongxian, Sword Saint Xing's heartbeat quickened, and with irrepressible agitation, he continued asking, "Is your birthday on the 10th day of the 9th month, Teacher Appreciation Day?" "Birthday?" Zhongxian shook his head in response. "I am an orphan, so I'm afraid I don't really know when my birthday is." His previous self had been wandering in the world as far as he could remember. Nowhere in his recollections had his father, mother, or any clues to his birthday appeared. As such, the only thing that Zhongxian knew was that he was 20-something this year. Anything other than that was really beyond his knowledge. "I'll just be perfectly honest with you." Noticing the confusion on the young man's face deepening, Sword Saint Xing decided not to beat around the bush anymore and got straight to the point. "If I'm not mistaken, you are very likely to be my long-lost son." "Your son?" Zhongxian was stunned for a moment before a miniature explosion happened in his head. "By your son, are you referring to the young prodigy?" Sword Saint Xing was not only the head of the Zhong clan but also the father of the young prodigy. As far as he knew, Sword Saint Xing seemed to have only a single son, so the other party's words would mean that he was the young prodigy. Zhongxian's mind was immediately plunged into chaos. For the past few months, he had been cursing the young prodigy for being engaged to Luo Ruoxin and yet never being around for her, and if he could, he would have already pummeled him into the ground several times by now. Never had he thought that the young prodigy would actually be him. "No, that's not right. I've checked for the presence of the Zhong clan bloodline in me as well, but it has been shown that there's no relationship between me and the Zhong clan." Zhongxian swiftly raised his rebuttal. He had once wondered if he was from the Zhong clan as well, and for that, he had even borrowed Zhong Zhouxiao's blood essence to conduct a blood test. The result from that test showed that there was absolutely no relationship between him and the Zhong clan at all. Taking a step back, even if that blood test was inaccurate, he did enter the Zhong clan's blood reservoir at one point in time, but he did not feel the slightest resonance with it at all. All of the clues went to show that there was no relationship between him and the Zhong clan. So, how could Sword Saint Xing possibly be his father? The matter concerning your Zhong clan bloodline has serious implications, so I'll explain it to you when we are in a more private setting. However, if you still harbor any doubts regarding the matter, you can verify your blood with my wife. Even if you have lost your Zhong clan bloodline, your mother's blood should still flow through your veins, Sword Saint Xing said as he gestured for Sword Saint Meng to come over. Sword Saint Meng could tell that the two men had been communicating telepathically with one another, so she swiftly flew over with an agitated look on her face. Zhongxian hesitated for a moment before asking, "How do we conduct the test?" Given Sword Saint Xing's strength and standing, there was no need for him to cook up such a lie. Furthermore, to point out that there was a scarlet birthmark on his bottom, while that might not be conclusive evidence, it might be good to check it. Whether it was real or not, at least there would be some closure for him and the Xingmeng Sword Saints. Otherwise, this matter would weigh on their minds. If, by chance, he really happened to be the missing young prodigy, there would no longer be anyone to stop him from marrying Luo Ruoxin. Everything would fall into place, and it would be a happy ending. Of course, it would be a little awkward for him to suddenly find himself with two parents, But perhaps because he had been an orphan in his previous life as well, he was not too put off by the notion of it. It would not be too difficult for him to accept the matter with time. Even if that was not the case, it would not make any difference to his plans anyway. After the other party apologized to him, he would have nothing to do with the Zhong clan anymore. The current him already wielded sufficient power and influence to stand against the Luo clan and the Zhong clan. If they were not willing to budge, he would just have to force them. This was one matter that he simply was not willing to relent on. "Give me a droplet of your blood," Sword Saint Meng told Zhongxian telepathically. Zhongxian tapped his finger forward, and a droplet of blood flew forth from his fingertip. Taking in a deep breath, Sword Saint Meng took out a jade token and carefully placed the blood droplet on it. After which, she made a small incision on her finger and squeezed out a droplet of blood on the jade token as well. Wang. As the two droplets of blood made contact with one another, they swiftly fused together. With a light buzzing sound, the jade token exuded a blinding crimson light. This. Sword Saint Meng's eyes immediately reddened, and her body trembled from agitation. "Your name is Zhongxian, right? My son, I have finally found you." Zhongxian was still in a dumbfounded state. He turned his gaze toward the jade token to examine it closely. He recognized the artifact. It was a tool used to test one's bloodline. Those who had direct blood relations would not only have their blood droplets fusing together, the jade token would also emanate a blinding crimson light. In other words, he had direct blood relations with Sword Saint Meng. Could this mean that he was really the son of the Xingmeng Sword Saints? So, he was the very same young prodigy whom he had hated with a passion. Could this be the will of heavens? Not only was Yang Shu, whom he had mentioned on a whim, a real person, even his fate with Luo Ruoxin was also predestined. Sword Saint Xing was also stunned by the results before he took in a deep breath and burst into hearty laughter. "Ha ha ha, we have finally found him." He had still been uncertain before this. After all, what were the odds of finding the son whom they had lost many years back amid the massive master-teacher continent? However, seeing the two droplets of blood fusing perfectly with one another, even this final sliver of doubt vanished from the bottom of his heart. After the two men were done fighting with one another, they had begun communicating telepathically with one another. Then, all of a sudden, everyone had become agitated at once. Unable to take the suspense any longer, Ren Qingyuan hurriedly asked, "Sword Saint Xing, what's wrong?" "Pavilion Master Ren, our Zhong clan shall drop all enmity with Zhongxian. We'll no longer pursue the previous matters. Also, I hope that the Master Teacher Pavilion will sell our Zhong clan a favor and retract the arrest warrant." Sword Saint Xing clasped his fist. "You want us to retract the arrest warrant?" This. Ren Qingyuan could hardly believe what he was hearing. Previously, it was the Zhong clan who had stirred the pot the most violently. Why would they suddenly drop the matter and even request him to retract the arrest warrant? Once the Master Teacher Pavilion issues an arrest warrant, it cannot be retracted easily, unless there are some kind of unique circumstances. What has happened? Ren Qingyuan asked once more. If the Master Teacher Pavilion issued and retracted its arrest warrant lightly, that would be as good as undermining the authority of its words. Even if they wanted to retract it, they would have to find a valid reason to do so. It was not so cheap as to be retracted after the two of them fought a battle and decided to make peace. "Zhongxian is the missing young prodigy of my Zhong clan. We have just verified it with a blood test, so there's no mistake about it," Sword Saint Xing said. "Our teacher is the young prodigy of the Zhong clan?" Zheng Yang and the others stared at one another in shock. They had followed their teacher ever since their time in the Tianqian kingdom, and they were painfully aware just how poor their teacher was. He had slowly paved his way forward with his own strength, having no one to rely on at all. How in the world did he become one of the core members of the Zhong clan within such a short period of time? Not to mention, the legendary figure who was born as a carnate saint, the young prodigy. With an incredulous look on his face, Zhong Wuheng roared in disbelief, "That's impossible. I tested his bloodline, and he definitely has no relationship with the Zhong clan at all." "Zhong Wuheng, are you insinuating that I can't even recognize my own son?" Sword Saint Xing harumphed coldly. As the first elder of the Zhong clan, You actually tried to assassinate and issued an arrest warrant on your own clan head. Return to the clan right now and await your punishment. Don't force me to make a move. Zhong Wuheng staggered weakly on the spot, and his face became ghastly pale. If Zhong Xian was truly the young prodigy, that would mean that he was the real clan head of the Zhong clan. Even as the first elder, the crime for attempting to kill the head of the Zhong clan was more than enough to put him to death multiple times. He's your son. Ren Qingyuan widened his eyes in disbelief as well. He had run a check on Zhong Xian's background before issuing the arrest warrant, and it was stated that the young man was an orphan from the Tianxian kingdom, having no background at all. Yet, in the blink of an eye, they were actually telling him that he was the head of the Zhong clan. If that was true, the Zhong clan was perfectly justified in requesting for the retracting of the arrest warrant. Chapter 1550 Sword Saint Meng's temper. Indeed, there's no mistake about this. Sword Saint Xing roared in laughter, his delight showing clearly on his face. Ever since his son disappeared, they had traveled far and wide in search of him. The past 20 years had not been easy for them at all. They had lived in trepidation, uncertain of the fate of their child. It was fortunate that the heavens had not abandoned them yet. They had managed to find their child in the end. Furthermore, not only had their child managed to grow to become an outstanding individual wielding power stronger than them, the students that he had groomed had also become powerhouses of the master-teacher continent. With such a son, what more could they wish more for? All of a sudden, they felt as if they were the most blissful people in the world. Ren Qingyuan pondered for a moment before replying. Since your Zhong clan has decided to make peace with Zhong Xian, and he's the young prodigy of the Zhong clan as well, it would indeed be illogical for the Zhong clan to continue pursuing this matter. If the other two powers are willing to settle this matter peacefully, I have no qualms with retracting the arrest warrant. Were it anyone else, even if both parties had decided to settle the matter peacefully, the master-teacher pavilion would surely have made him pay a hefty price. However, the 5 students that Zhong Xian had raised were the head of the Poison Hall, an expert of the Soul Oracles, the future Hall Master of the Combat Master Hall, the young master of the Yuan clan, and the head of the Spirit Awakener Guild. And now, it had even been revealed that Zhong Xian himself was the head of the Zhong clan. Even the master-teacher pavilion would find it difficult to punish such a person. Before they could even lay a finger on him, more than a dozen 9-star master teachers of the master-teacher pavilion headquarters had already been incapacitated. If they insisted on dealing with Zhong Xian, even if they won the war, the master-teacher pavilion would surely be in shambles afterward. By requesting for the arrest warrant to be retracted, Sword Saint Xing had effectively provided a platform for the master-teacher pavilion to back out of this mess without suffering a heavy hit to its reputation. Naturally, there was no reason for him not to grab this opportunity. Simple. Chuckling softly, Sword Saint Xing turned to Yu Ruoxin and said, "Elder Ruo, we were once sparring partners, and I already consider you an old acquaintance of mine. Will you be willing to sell me this favor and let this matter go? I'll surely pay you a visit in the future and compensate the Glacier Plain Court's loss." Sword Saint Xing, this is no longer a matter about compensating our loss anymore but our dignity. Yu Ruoxin harumphed furiously. So what if he's the young prodigy of the Glacier Plain Court? He has destroyed the many millenniums of heritage of our Glacier Plain Court and kidnapped our young court chief. The grudge between the Glacier Plain Court and him is already irreconcilable. With the severe damage that it had suffered this time around, along with the loss of its future court chief, it was only a matter of time before the Glacier Plain Court was reduced to a third-tier power. A power that had enjoyed many millenniums of glory had ended up falling so far in her hands. The greatest pride in her life was when she had been chosen to become the first elder of the Glacier Plain Court. She had become a celebrated figure on the master-teacher continent, respected wherever she went. However, beneath this glorious exterior, she knew that she had to shoulder the hopes and dreams of everyone in the Glacier Plain Court. Thus, she had vowed solemnly to bring the Glacier Plain Court to a height that it had never seen before, and she viewed it as her purpose in life. But that day, when everything had been destroyed by lightning, her hopes and dreams had been utterly crushed, and all that was left was raging fury for the culprit behind it. As such, even though she knew that the winds were no longer in her favor, her anger and indignation still bit tightly into her rational mind, not allowing her to let this matter go. Seeing the infuriated state that Yu Ruoxin was in, Sword Saint Xing was just about to placate her when another wrathful voice sounded. So what if it's irreconcilable? Are you planning to make a move on my son? Just try touching a strand of his hair, and I'll make sure the entire city of Glacier is dyed crimson. My son might have been kind enough to only destroy your buildings, but I won't be as compassionate as him. If you don't back down here, you can rest assured that there won't be a tomorrow for your Glacier Plain Court. The one who had just spoken was Sword Saint Meng. She had just been rejoicing over the fact that her son was still alive when Yu Ruoxin suddenly uttered such words. Seeing that there was someone threatening the life of her son, how could she possibly remain calm? It was only in view of the pathetic state the Glacier Plain Court was in that she chose to let them off despite their attempts to kill her son. Yet, who could have thought that they would still be so unrelenting on this matter? Why? Do you think that my son is a pushover or that I'm a pushover? I know that I'm no match for Sword Saint Meng, and if you wish to massacre our Glacier Plain Court, there's nothing I can do to stop you. But justice is in the hearts of every single one of us here. The Zhong clan might be powerful, but the world won't turn a blind eye to you abusing your power in such a manner. Yu Ruoxin gritted her teeth. Sure, let the world look with their eyes wide open as I massacre your Glacier Plain Court. Seeing how Yu Ruoxin was still trying to play the role of a victim after what she had done, Sword Saint Meng flew into a state of rage. In this moment, she was not in any mood to catch up with Zhong Xian anymore. She raised the sword in her hand up high, ready to make a move on Yu Ruoxin. Seeing his wife flying into a fit of anger, Sword Saint Xing was shocked. He hurriedly rushed ahead to stop her. Dear, calm down, calm down. Yu Ruoxin might not pose any threat to them at all, but she represented the entire Glacier Plain Court. If she was killed right before Ren Qingyuan and the others, not even the Zhong clan would be able to resolve this matter easily. Are you still a man? Someone is bullying your son. It's one thing for you to not stand up for him, but you are even stopping me too. Sword Saint Meng's eyebrows shot up in fury. Sword Saint Xing's face turned bitter. Look, aren't I trying to mediate the situation here? If mediation works, why the hell would we still need to cultivate? Sword Saint Xing flung her sleeves furiously. If she doesn't agree to it, we just have to beat her into submission. I, Wang Mengya, have dominated the continent for so many years, and I can tell you that my fist and my sword have won others over, not my virtue. If anyone dares oppose me, I'll just have to beat them till they cave in. This. Sword Saint Xing's eyebrows twitched uncontrollably, not knowing how to respond to that. He knew his wife's character very well. In fact, her hot-headed temper had thrown the Zhong clan into disarray on multiple occasions in the past too. If Yu Ruoxin continued pursuing this matter, there was no doubt that his wife would really wipe out the entire Glacier Plain Court. Our teacher's mother sure is formidable. Zheng Yang and the others gulped as they watched the sight with widened eyes. To threaten to even destroy the entire Glacier Plain Court. It was no wonder their teacher was never on the losing end of things. With such domineering genes in his body, it was a given that those who intended him harm would end up paying the price instead. Zhong Xian's eyebrows twitched slightly upon hearing those words as well. To be honest, he had still been a bit skeptical about the sudden appearance of his father and mother. He had never experienced any familial relationships before, be it in his current life or the previous one, so he had no idea how it would be. However, watching at Sword Saint Meng stepping forward domineeringly to protect him, he suddenly felt that it might not be that bad after all. Sword Saint Meng, please calm down. Fighting will not resolve anything here. Ren Qingyuan stepped in to defuse the situation. Ren Qingyuan, you still have the cheek to say those words. Sword Saint Meng immediately turned her head over and glared daggers at Ren Qingyuan. Since you know that fighting won't resolve anything, why did you bring so many 9-star master teachers here to encircle my son? Is it because he looks weak to you? Since you want to speak up on Yu Ruoxin's behalf, why don't you take her place instead then? I haven't settled the score with you for making a move on my son yet. Cough cough. Carry on, carry on. Treat it as if I never said anything. Ren Qingyuan's hair stood on end upon hearing those words. Sword Saint Meng was like a bucket of oil, triggering at the slightest spark. Her character had already been so back in her younger years. Back when she was still a student at the Sanctum of Sages, she had caused many uproars among the student populace, and when the elders lectured her for it, she simply told them that she would quit the Sanctum of Sages and stomped out without any hesitation. Many had thought that she would tone down after marrying and having her own child, but who could have thought that not even time or motherhood could calm her temper, and if it was only Sword Saint Meng, Ren Qingyuan still would not have been that fearful. The problem lay in Sword Saint Xing. If the two of them collaborated together, he really would not stand much of a chance. As the head of the Zhong clan, Sword Saint Xing was an intelligent and rational person who knew what to do and what not to do in a situation, but when it came to matters concerning his wife, his rationality would be blown away like a straw hut in the face of a hurricane. There was no one among the upper echelon of the master-teacher continent who did not know how doting he was of his wife, and if anyone dared hurt her, he would immediately go berserk. Back then, while they were roaming the continent, there had been an elder from a minor power who was foolish enough to insult Sword Saint Meng. Without any hesitation, Sword Saint Xing had flown right over to his sect and wiped it out entirely. In any case, it would be best to avoid provoking this couple as much as possible. Sword Saint Meng, I know that you are strong, but our Glacier Plain Court won't back down. Unless you kill every single last one of us, there's no way we'll let this matter go. Yu Ruoxin spat as she looked at Sword Saint Meng with deep resolve. She knew that her deeds would earn the ire of the young court chief, and she would suffer the consequences for her actions once the court chief fully awakened her pure yin body, but as long as the Glacier Plain Court could rise to the top, her sacrifice would have paid off. However, Zhongxian had reduced the Glacier Plain Court to rubble and kidnapped the young court chief, dashing every last hope that she had. Her desire for vengeance had already exceeded her fear for anything. Even at the cost of her life, she was determined to bring Zhongxian down. Very well, let me see how deep your resolve runs. Seeing that Yu Ruoxin was still obstinately holding on, Sword Saint Meng raised her sword high in the sky. But in that moment, a cold voice suddenly echoed in the air. Sword Saint Meng, please calm down. Allow me to settle this matter instead. Hong Long. As soon as those words were spoken, the cocoon-like object in front of Zhongxian suddenly emanated an astounding aura that pierced straight through the clouds, seemingly tearing the heavens apart. Zhao Yue's meridian reconstruction was complete. Chapter 1551 The True Sanctum Head 1 Why Young Court Chief. Upon hearing that voice, Yu Ruoxin's eyes narrowed in shock. She quickly turned her gaze over, only to see the cocoon blasting apart layer after layer. At the same time, the otherworldly demon aura that was emanated a moment ago swiftly transformed into a pure yin aura, and it felt as if everything within tens of thousands of li would be turned into ice under the aura. Who? A slender figure burst forth from the cocoon and rose into the air. The surrounding spiritual energy swiftly surged toward her, forming a huge vortex with her at its center. At the same time, the water vapor in the air formed into a glistening icy robe around her, emanating a bone-freezing chill. That is, the perfect awakening of the pure yin body. Yu Ruoxin's body stiffened in astonishment. While the preceding court chiefs had managed to awaken their pure yin bodies, most of them had still been far from achieving a perfect awakening. There was a legend in the Glacier Plain Court that if one achieved a perfect awakening of the pure yin body, one would be able to bring frost to over 10,000 li with just a wave of one's hand. It would not pale in comparison even against the innate poison body. If anything, its prowess might exceed it even. Even the founder of the Glacier Plain Court had failed to achieve this level, only barely managing to awaken it through the reconciliation of yin and yang. Who could have thought that Zhao Yue would actually successfully awaken it? Did her meridians not collapse completely, causing her cultivation to be destroyed? What in the world happened? It's our first senior. Zheng Yang and the others clenched their fists in agitation. Not bad. Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. Using the new meridian network to reconstruct Zhao Yue's meridians was a risky move, but it had paid off. Not only had her cultivation been restored, her pure yin body had also been fully awakened. With this, she would be able to push her cultivation up to an unfathomable level. It was fortunate that his effort had not been in vain. It's me. As the vortex of spiritual energy vanished, the young lady's figure appeared before everyone's eyes. She wore a robe made purely out of white snow, and the cold air in the surroundings seemed to bend to her will, as if she was the overlord of ice. Yu Ruoxin watched the imposing figure in a daze for a moment before hurriedly falling to her knees. Yu Ruoxin pays respect to the new court chief of the Glacier Plain Court. With the complete awakening of her pure yin body, Zhao Ya would be officially viewed as the court chief of the Glacier Plain Court. This was the rule that had been passed down by the ancestors. Not to mention, Zhao Ya had even achieved a perfect awakening. With this, there was no longer anyone in the Glacier Plain Court, and this was including the wills of the preceding court chiefs who would dare oppose her. Very well, it seems like you still recognize me as your court chief. Right now, I shall make my decree. With her hands behind her back, Zhao Ya gazed down coldly on Yu Ruoxin. From this day forth, my teacher, Zhongxian, will be the greatest benefactor of the Glacier Plain Court. Any disciples of the Glacier Plain Court must accord him with the respect toward a teacher. Should anyone fail to abide by this decree, she shall be expelled from the Glacier Plain Court and executed upon sight. Yes, Court Chief. Yu Ruoxin replied with a forceful yet slightly quivering voice. My teacher has devoted his time and effort in order to awaken my unique constitution, but you abused your authority and influence to frame him for sins that he hasn't committed, compelling the Master Teacher Pavilion to issue an arrest warrant on him. I hereby order for Yu Ruoxin to be imprisoned in the Chanting Serenity Hall, and she's not to leave the compounds without my command. Zhao Ya spat coldly. Also, you are to release my mother and return her freedom. Her mother had been imprisoned by the First Elder for willfully escaping from the Glacier Plain Court. Now that she had become the court chief and wielded unparalleled authority, it went without saying that the first thing that she should do was have her release. Yes, court chief. Yu Ruoxin hurriedly nodded. Very well, go on and execute my orders. Zhao Ya waved her hand authoritatively. Yu Ruoxin might have been hostile to her and her mother previously, but her loyalty to the Glacier Plain Court was unquestionable. Zhao Ya had no doubt that Yu Ruoxin would abide by her commands now that she had become the court chief. Thus, she turned her sight to Ren Qingyuan and said, Pavilion Master Ren, I believe that you should have heard my decree as well. Zhongxian is my teacher and my benefactor, and the Glacier Plain Court will do everything within its means to protect him, even if it means going against the Master Teacher Pavilion. I ask of you to reconsider your options. This. Ren Qingyuan's eyebrows shot up. Who could have thought that the court chief of the Glacier Plain Court would actually become his student too? The Glacier Plain Court, the Poison Hall, the Zhong Clan, the Spirit Awakener Hall, the Combat Master Hall, the Yuan Clan. Those were behemoths that could send tremors running through the Master Teacher continent just with a stomp of their feet, and yet, they had all bowed to the command of a single man. Zhonsha. Sighing helplessly, Ren Qingyuan turned his sight to the deputy sanctum head of the Sanctum of Sages and asked, The Glacier Plain Court and the Zhong clan have already expressed their intentions to reconcile with Zhongsha. May I ask what the stance of your Sanctum of Sages is? Zhongsha lowered his gaze in a dilemma. This was really a difficult position for him to be in. The Sanctum of Sages was indubitably weaker than both the Glacier Plain Court and the Zhong clan, but it still had to uphold its long legacy as the #1 academy where countless powerhouses had originated from. Considering the devastation that had occurred to it, if they let the matter go so simply, what right would they have to serve as the teachers of the geniuses of the world? More importantly, he would not be able to face those injured elders back in the sanctum either. If I drop the matter at this, the preceding generations of sanctum heads will never forgive me. So, I can only stake my life in the end. Even if I die from this, at the very least, I won't have let the ancestors down. Zhongsha said resolutely. He could chicken out, but the Sanctum of Sages could not. If others learned that the Sanctum of Sages had bowed down to another person, even if the other party was the head of the Zhong clan and had many formidable experts, what authority would it have left? This. Knowing Zhongsha's thoughts, Ren Qingyuan also did not know what he could say to dissuade the other party. Zhongxian was a student of the Sanctum of Sages, yet he had refused to abide by its orders and even injured the elders and the deputy sanctum head, not to mention that he had destroyed many buildings. If they let this matter go just like that, the Sanctum of Sages would really lose its dignity. Given that even Sword Saint Xing isn't your match, there's no way that I'll be able to defeat you either. Zhongxia flew into the air and declared resoundingly, Zhongxia, I have brought the deputy sanctum head token here, and as long as you withstand its attack, the Sanctum of Sages will let this matter go. Deputy sanctum head token? That's right, Zhongxia said. This token represents my identity, and it harnesses the wills of the predecessors. It's one of the guardian artifacts of the Sanctum of Sages, which only generations of deputy sanctum heads are qualified to wield. I wouldn't be a match for you given my limited cultivation, but through the deputy sanctum head token, I will still be able to put up a fight against you. If you are able to withstand my strength even then, it can only mean that you are already beyond the Sanctum of Sages' current means to deal with, and there will be no purpose in it pursuing this matter any longer. Zhongxia did not think that it was too likely that he would be able to defeat Zhongxian even with the deputy sanctum head token, but this was something that had to be done in order to make the Sanctum of Sages' stance clear. If he was still unable to defeat Zhongxian with the strength of the deputy sanctum head, that would mean that even the predecessors were unable to defeat him. It would show that while the Sanctum of Sages had no choice but to back down due to its lack of strength, by no means had it grown cowardly or lost its dignity. All right. Zhongxian nodded. He was currently invincible against all beneath Ancient Sage, so no matter how powerful the deputy sanctum head token was, he was confident that he would be able to withstand it with ease. Good. Zhongxia tapped his finger forward, and a token emanating a faint violet glow appeared before him. Zhongxia bit his finger, and a droplet of blood fell on it. In an instant, the token turned burningly hot, and a powerful, formidable aura burst forth from it. Countless experts had risen from the Sanctum of Sages over its many years of history, and it was with their wills that the deputy sanctum head token was created. While it came nowhere close to matching up to the real sanctum head token, its power was not to be underestimated. Noticing the hint of the anxiety of Sword Saint Meng's face, Sword Saint Xing grabbed her hand and squeezed it tightly. Rest assured, given that even I am no match for him, he should be fine. Go. Boom. Under Zhongxia's control, the deputy sanctum head token released a light buzz, an unbelievable burst of energy shot forth from it. Even before reaching its target, the space in its path was already crumbling inch after inch. Chapter 1552 The True Sanctum Head 2 Not bad. In face of the immense pressure exerted by the deputy sanctum head token, Zhongxian did not panic in the least. Instead, with a light smile, he raised his finger in preparation to deal with the attack before him. In this moment, he had already fully reconstructed Zhao Yue's meridians, so there was no longer any need for him to remain seated on the ground. Straightening his back, he swiftly drove the energy within his body, intending to seal of the space ahead of him to seal the advancement of the deputy sanctum head token. However, before he could do so, his eyes suddenly narrowed, and his body stiffened in horror. CR*P. He muttered. Following that, he felt strength receding from his body like an ebbing tide, vanishing in an instant. At the same time, his spirit also seemed to have been sapped from his body, and he nearly collapsed to the ground. At this crucial moment, the power that he had gained from the Pavilion Master Seal actually vanished. Could this be what Zhongxia wanted to say previously, that the power only lasts 10 minutes? Zhongxian nearly burst into tears on the spot. The unreliable Zhongxia had vanished without explaining the use of the Pavilion Master Seal, and it was the first time that he had used it as well. He had thought that he would still have enough time in order to overcome the current crisis, but who could have thought that he would only have a short 10-minute? It would have been perfectly simple for him to deal with this attack when he was infused with the strength from the Pavilion Master Seal, but now that it had disappeared, as a dimension-sundering realm primary stage cultivator, he might just end up being squashed into meat paste. Boom. Such thoughts swiftly flashed across his mind before vanishing. By this point, the token had already arrived right before him. Jeji. Even under the pressure of the token, he could already feel his bones creaking in protest, and his head was squeezed to the point that it seemed almost as if it would burst at any moment. Any more than that, and he would really be exceeding the limits of his body. It looks like I can only try to escape. Knowing that the current him did not wield the strength to overcome the Deputy Sanctum head token, Zhongxian took a deep breath and prepared to flee. However, as he was about to do so, a brilliant light suddenly glowed from his body, and following which, the imposing token charging at him in the sky started vibrating intensely. Pada! It fell to the floor and lay down on the ground, not daring to raise itself in the slightest, almost as if a servant paying respects to its master. This. Zhongxian was struck dumb for a moment before discreetly heaving a sigh of relief. The close shave with death earlier had already left his back drenched with sweat. While he was still trying to make sense of the situation that had just happened, in the sky, Zhongxia narrowed his eyes in shock after seeing what had happened, and his face immediately turned utterly pale. Despite not exerting the slightest strength, he was still able to force the Deputy Sanctum head token to bow subserviently to him. There is only one possibility for such an occurrence: the Deputy Sanctum head token has viewed Zhongxian to be a person more esteemed than me and dares not make a move on her. However, the Deputy Sanctum head token harnesses the wills of countless experts, and to make them bow so deferentially, could it be that? But how could that be possible? Isn't it Feng Zi? How could it be him? Zhongxia shook his head vehemently in disbelief. There was only one thing in the world that could make the Deputy Sanctum head token submit completely, and that was the Sanctum head token. While they had learned that Sage Kuei had chosen a new Sanctum head candidate recently, they had always thought that the person was Feng Zi. Yet, contrary to their expectations, it turned out to be Zhongxian instead. After all the mess and damage that you have caused to the Sanctum of Sages. After making an enemy out of the entire Sanctum of Sages. Are you seriously telling me now that you are actually the Sanctum head? This massive shock left him feeling as if he would explode on the spot. Since you are the Sanctum head, the entire Sanctum of Sages is yours. Why did you cause such a huge fuss then? How is this different from destroying your own home? In his moment of distress, Zhongxia turned his head and saw Zhongwuheng, and all of a sudden, he felt much better. Indeed, no matter how vicious Zhongxian had been with the Sanctum of Sages, at the very least, it was not as bad as with the Zhong clan. The fellow would go to the extent of destroying his real home, let alone the Sanctum of Sages. The dismal Zhongxia could not take it any longer and sent a telepathic message over. Zhongxia, you are the Sanctum head. Yeah. Zhongxian nodded. After receiving the Sanctum head token, Sage Kuei had warned him not to tell anyone of his identity until the 3 seals had been deciphered. However, in this case, it was Zhongxia who had guessed the truth himself, so it could not be considered a breach of the rules. This was just like how Yangxia had guessed it back then on himself as well. As expected. Hearing the confirmation, Zhongxia's body staggered weakly. For a Deputy Sanctum head to actually issue an arrest warrant on the real Sanctum head, that was truly a count of insubordination. It was fortunate that Zhongxian had managed to get away then. Otherwise, if he had really killed the Sanctum head, he would have become a great sinner. Seeing that there was a lack of movement from Zhongxia after the Deputy Sanctum head token fell to the ground, Ren Qingyuan turned his gaze over and asked, Zhongxia, are you admitting defeat? While the Deputy Sanctum head token had been launched with astounding force, it had fallen to the ground before it even reached Zhongxian. In the eyes of the outsiders, it appeared as if Zhongxia was intentionally going easy on him. I admit defeat. Zhongxia hurriedly nodded. You said earlier that your grudge with him is irreconcilable, and yet, you went easy on him as soon as the battle started. Aren't you taking this matter too lightly? Is that all there is to the dignity of your Sanctum of Sages? Elder Chu sneered coldly by the side. The Glacier Plain Court and the Zhong clan had already submitted so far. He had thought that at least the Sanctum of Sages would push its case to the very end, but who could have thought that it would be the one most lacking in backbone? Elder Chu, this is an internal affair of our Sanctum of Sages. An outsider like you should hold your tongue and refrain from interfering in our issues. Zhongxia replied sharply before pocketing the Deputy Sanctum head token and backing away. Then, he turned around to face the crowd from the Sanctum of Sages and declared, from today onward, Our sanctum of sages shall be under Zhongsha's leadership. His words are the very decree of the sanctum of sages itself, and if anyone dares oppose him, that person will be banished from the sanctum of sages and never to be recruited again. His voice resounded across the entire city, carrying a firm resolve behind it. This. Zhongsha, even if you choose to let him off, surely our sanctum of sages hasn't lowered so much as to have to submit to a person like him. Why? I can't accept this decree. The elders who had followed Zhongsha there looked at one another, flabbergasted by what they had just heard. Even if you can't defeat Zhongsha, surely you didn't have to make the entire sanctum of sages bow down to him, right? This is illogical. Do you want to know the reason? Zhongsha asked. Yes, I want to know. Without a convincing reason, there's no way I can follow such an order. Indeed, even if our sanctum of sages isn't a match for him, we still can't bow to another man so easily, let alone someone like him. The elders of the sanctum of sages protested indignantly. Very well, I'll tell you the reason then. Hearing those words, Zhongsha shook his head. With a resounding voice, he revealed the truth. Zhongxian is our new sanctum head. Our new sanctum head. What does that mean? Everyone was stupefied. It means exactly what it sounds like. He's the sanctum head that Sage Kuei has chosen, and that's why my deputy sanctum head token submitted to him, not daring to injure him. Naturally, as the real sanctum head, his authority over the deputy sanctum head token is greater than mine, so it heeded his orders instead. Zhongsha said. Our sanctum head. But all of the elders were not able to process the shocking revelation that they had just heard. Not only them, Sword Saint Xing, Ren Qingyuan, and the others were also shocked silly as well, and they stared at Zhongxian as if they were looking at a monster. The head of the Zhong clan, the teacher of Glacier Plain Court's court chief, and now, he had another identity to his name, the sanctum head of the sanctum of sages. From a man who the three powers had been dying to tear apart, within less than a single hour, he had become a man who commanded all three of them. Could there be anything more dramatic than this? My son has become the head of the sanctum of sages? The Xingmeng sword saints stared at one another with eyes widened in shock. Just finding their son was able to bring them utmost bliss, but who could have thought that their son would be like a pile of mystery boxes, bringing them surprises from unexpected corners one after another. How is this possible? Elder Chu's body twitched, and before that moment, he had never felt so tearful in his life. Chapter 1553 Senior Elder Chu had never had a good impression of Zhongxian. The first time that they met at the conference room of the Glacier Plain Court, the young man had disguised himself as Yang Shi and discreetly poisoned him. Everything that the young man had done was at odds with the conventions and formalities of the Master-Teacher Pavilion, which only furthered his hostility for the young man. As such, when he reported the matter to the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters, he had intentionally exaggerated certain matters and twisted some facts in order to convince Pavilion Master Ren to issue an arrest warrant on the young man. He had thought that with so many master teachers after him, that young man would never be able to get away. Yet, who could have thought that his students would suddenly appear, and each of them was stronger than the last? But even if his students were powerful, as long as the three powers stayed united on the same front and insisted on punishing the young man, they would still have been able to get him in the end. Yet, moments later, he had been revealed as the true head of the Zhong clan and the Sanctum of Sages. Even the court chief of the Glacier Plain Court turned out to be his student too. At this rate, the Master-Teacher Pavilion might really turn out to be young man's before he knew it. He turned his head to look at the crowd. Every single person in the area had a dazed look on his face, completely shocked by the revelation. Ha ha ha. Well done, my son. Sword Saint Xing's hearty laughter broke the silence. My son is a person bound for great things. Putting aside how you were at his age, even the current you can't match him. Sword Saint Meng boasted proudly. Her son had still been an infant when she lost him, and for the years after that, there had been many times that she had woken up frightened after dreaming of her son being put through all kinds of hardship and suffering, living a life worse than death. But when they met once more, her son had already become the head of the Sanctum of Sages, and his students had all become powerhouses of the Master-Teacher continent, figures who could stand their own ground in the world without fearing anyone. In fact, it might not be an exaggeration to say that he was one of the most influential figures on the master-teacher continent at this moment. I almost forgot. Son, to tell you the truth, we betrothed you to someone else before you were even born, Sword Saint Meng told Zhongxian hesitantly. Then, she decisively turned her head to the first elder of the Luo clan, Luo Qingchen, and harumphed. Luo Qingchen, what should we do about the engagement then? I heard that your little princess already has someone whom she fancies. This doesn't seem to be what we have agreed on back then. We'll go ahead with the marriage as soon as possible. Hearing those words, a chuckle escaped from Luo Qingchen's mouth. As for the person whom our little princess fancies, I suppose there won't be any problem with that anymore. You can ask Zhongsha about that. He should be clearer about that than any one of us here. Sword Saint Meng turned her gaze back to her son and asked doubtfully, do you know of the matter? She had heard rumors that the little princess of the Luo clan had someone whom she liked, but as the Luo clan had insisted that they would deal with the matter themselves, she still had no idea whom the little princess's lover was. This. With a slightly awkward look on his face, Zhongxian scratched his head and replied, if I'm not mistaken, her person whom she likes should be me. You. Sword Saint Meng widened her eyes in bafflement. That's right. Zhongxian nodded with a helpless smile. Thinking back, the entire course of events seemed almost like a bad joke that the world was playing on them. First, the Luo clan had found out that the little princess had someone whom she liked and dispatched Luo Shenqing to assassinate him. Afterward, Luo Shenqing delegated the task to him, wanting him to do the deed on his behalf. And after several incidents, it turned out that he was actually the young prodigy that was supposed to marry the little princess. In this moment, it felt as if he had been cheated of his emotions. If, in the first place, he was Luo Ruoxin's fiancé, why the heck did he need to undergo all that anxiety, desperation, and hostility over the past few months? Everything would have simply ended with a happy ending with his identity exposed. Oh, when did you manage to seduce her? Quick, share the story with your mother. Sword Saint Meng immediately cast aside her expert-like aura and put on her gossip face. Seduce. Can't you use a better phrase than that? Zhongxian stared at Sword Saint Meng speechlessly before shaking his head. Let's talk about that later. There's still a few more things that we have to settle first. After saying those words, he turned his sights to Luo Qingchen not too far away and said, Elder Qingchen, since I am the young prodigy and the head of the Zhong clan, your Luo clan should be able to accept my relationship with the little princess, right? If that's the case, I believe that there shouldn't be any need for you to put her under house arrest anymore, am I right? Of course. Luo Qingchen hurriedly nodded. Previously, he had still been afraid that the relationship that the little princess had outside would foil the Luo clan's ties with the Zhong clan. Who could have thought that the person whom she liked would so coincidentally be the young prodigy of the Zhong clan, whom she had an engagement with? Since that was the case, why would the Luo clan have to restrict their relationship anymore? Let their love take flight. They would not bat an eye even if a baby popped out that instant. Luo Qingchen stroked his beard as he asked Sword Saint Xing, I'll return right now to ask for her release. When does your Zhong clan intend to proceed on with the marriage? This future son-in-law of the Luo clan was not only the head of the Zhong clan but also the sanctum head of the Sanctum of Sages. On top of that, his students governed the Poison Hall, Combat Master Hall, Spirit Awakener Guild, Glacier Plain Court, and the Yuan clan. If the Luo clan could ally together with those powers, its standing would be far stronger than before. Naturally, they could not let go of such good son-in-law material. If possible, they would prefer the marriage to happen as soon as possible. Otherwise, once news spread, who knew how many clans would attempt to betroth their daughters to the Zhong clan? I'll first bring him back to the ancestral hall to acknowledge the ancestors before preparing the betrothal gifts to be sent over. Sword Saint Xing replied. The matrimony of the Zhong and the Luo clan was extremely important. Initially, they had still been a little worried about how it would go, especially considering that the young prodigy was missing, and the little princess was reluctant. Such unhappiness could eventually culminate into a tragedy. Since all those problems had been resolved, and both parties were intent on getting together, it would be best to put them together as soon as possible. Very well. I'll head back to make preparations as well. Luo Qingchen chuckled before bidding his farewell and leaving. All right, we should be making a move. Sword Saint Xing turned to Zhongxian with an expectant smile. This. Knowing that his father was inviting him back to the Zhong clan to acknowledge the ancestors, Zhongxian hesitated for a moment, but eventually, he still nodded in consent. Since his previous self was really the young prodigy of the Zhong clan, there was no qualms with him acknowledging the ancestors of the Zhong clan. Besides, he had a very favorable view of his parents. He was not too certain how the relationship between a parent and a child should be like, but he could feel how protective they were of him. He was also fond of their decisive character, never allowing conventions or formalities to blindly guide their actions. Just as the group was about to leave, Elder Chu suddenly stepped forward and bellowed, "Hold on a moment. You can't leave yet. What's wrong?" Sword Saint Xing turned around and directed a hostile frown at Elder Chu. He has only resolved the problem concerning the three powers, but the conflict between him and the Master-Teacher Pavilion hasn't been resolved yet. Elder Chu exclaimed. Look at the mess that his students have caused. The head of the Poison Hall, Wei Ruyan, has poisoned so many experts of our Master-Teacher Pavilion, and the leader of the Spirit Awakener Guild, Wang Ying, has enchanted all of the Master-Teacher Pavilions in the area, resulting in massive losses on our part. How should we settle this problem? Indeed. There's the matter of the Pavilion Master Seal as well. Clan Head Zhong, I have to request you return it to me. This concerns the honor and prestige of our Master-Teacher Pavilion, Ren Qingyuan added. This. Hearing the other party demanding the return of the Pavilion Master Seal, Zhongxian's face twitched slightly. He turned to Wei Ruyan and the others and said, Ruyan, release the poison that you have placed on these Master Teachers. Wang Ying, get your Spirit Awakeners to place all of the buildings back to where they belong. As for the Pavilion Master Seal, pardon me, but I can't return it to you yet. You can't return it to me? Why? Ren Qingyuan frowned in displeasure. Rest assured. Since no one is able to tame the Pavilion Master Seal, no one will bother to steal it from him either. I really have no idea how you can find the courage in you to talk about honor and prestige after sullying my son's innocence. Come back to ask for it after you have reinstated his master-teacher identity and restored his reputation. Sword Saint Meng interjected impatiently. You. Ren Qingyuan glared at Sword Saint Meng furiously. Pavilion Master Ren, we mustn't reinstate his master-teacher identity. A master-teacher must be virtuous in order to serve as a role model for the rest of the world. Just the fact that he dared pass off as Yangshi's student shows that he has absolutely no regard for the sanctity of lineage at all. We can't let someone who has blatantly crossed the rules of the Master-Teacher Pavilion remain as a master-teacher. Elder Chu argued vehemently. But before he could finish his words, the space ahead suddenly warped, and two figures came into appearance. One of them was an elder Yangshi. Yangshi, you came at the perfect time. Zhongxian over here has claimed to be your student, and not only so, he even attempted to pass off as you. Seeing that it was Yangxian, Elder Chu immediately called out excitedly, only to see Yangshi walking up to Zhongxian and bowing with clasped fist. Senior. Chapter 1554 Apologize, Master-Teacher Pavilion. 1 Senior. It was as if a bolt of lightning had struck Elder Chu, and his body wobbled unstably on the spot. What the heck was going on? Yangsha was not only the strongest cultivator in the entire Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters, he was also considered the most senior of them all as well. Despite being the deputy pavilion master, even Ren Qingyuan would still have to address Yangsha as his senior uncle. One thing that Yangsha was known for was how forbidding he could become when it came to rules and formalities, so Elder Chu had thought that the other party would fly into a rage and teach Zhongxian a lesson once he heard of this matter. But Yangsha simply walked straight up to Zhongxian, bowed to him, and addressed him as senior. If Zhongxian is your senior, doesn't that make me his junior? Not only him, Ren Qingyuan nearly keeled over after hearing those words. Having students as the head of the Combat Master Hall, chief of the Glacier Plain Court, master of the Poison Hall, leader of the Spirit Awakener Guild? Fine, I can accept that. His true identity being the head of the Zhong clan? Alright, there might really be such a coincidence in the world. But to having Yang Shi address him as his senior? What the heck? When did the most senior member of the Master Teacher Pavilion become your junior? Going down this road, doesn't this mean that all of the Master Teachers on the Master Teacher continent are actually your juniors? A mouthful of blood welled up at the back of Ren Qingyuan's throat, ready to spurt forth at any moment. He felt so stifled within that he might just explode from the inside. Having served as the Deputy Pavilion Master for several centuries, he had seen all kinds of geniuses and experts, but this was the first time that he had seen someone like that. To be honest, he had intended for the Master Teacher Pavilion to be the first one to get to Zhongxian so that he could force the young man to spit out his secret to advancing his cultivation so swiftly. As for whether the young man should be punished or not, that was just a secondary concern of inconsequential importance. However, in the end, not only did he suffer trauma after trauma, the other party even became his senior uncle in the blink of an eye. To have a 20-year-old lad as his senior uncle, something felt very off. Sword Saint Xing and Sword Saint Meng traded gazes too, and they could not help but gulp in shock. They had thought that the greatest shocks were already over, but from the look of it, what they had encountered previously was nothing at all. To actually be Yang Shi's senior, that was truly insanity. If that was the case, would that not put them a generation more senior than Yang Shi? Paying no heed to the astounded crowd, Zhongxian shot a glance at the plump man following behind Yang Shi, and after confirming that the latter was still fine, he heaved a sigh of relief. Young master, I thought that I would never see you again. Upon seeing Zhongxian, Sun Qiong immediately rushed forward, and tears and snot dribbled down his face. It might just have been a single day, but not once in his life had he ever felt so frightened and helpless before. When he heard Yang Shi say that the old master did not truly exist, he had realized that he had been living in a web of lies all along. All of the confidence that he had built up collapsed in an instant, and his mind had nearly broken down. He had no idea how he arrived in the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, but he had found himself surrounded by many 9-star Master Teachers. Their words wielded some compelling power, forcing him to cultivate according to his words, and eventually, his cultivation had ended up going berserk. He had thought that he would really meet his end then, but who could have thought that Yang Shi would return at that moment? This time, Yang Shi was much more amiable than before. Without the severity in his voice, the other party told him warmly that he had made a mistake and that his young master was actually his senior. In that instant, Sun Qiong felt as if he had been pulled out from the abyss of despair and placed on cloud 9. All those twists had happened one another so quickly that he almost felt as if it was all a dream. If not for the fact that they were in the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, he would have really thought the Yang Shi whom he had met there was a fake. Seeing that the fellow had grown slightly plumper compared to when they last met, Zhongxian waved off Sun Qiong's agitation and instructed, "Make sure to cultivate properly in the future, got it?" "Yes." Sun Qiong hurriedly nodded. Turning to his students, Zhongxian said, "Zheng Yang, I'll be leaving Sun Qiong in your hands. If he doesn't listen to your instructions, you are free to use the torture tools in the Combat Master Hall to force him to submit. Make sure to train him well." "Yes, teacher." Zheng Yang clasped his fist. After which, he turned his gaze to Sun Qiong and chuckled softly. "Uncle Sun, this way please." Hearing that he would have to cultivate, Sun Qiong's agitation swiftly waned, and it did not take long for him to become completely spiritless. After dealing with Sun Qiong, Zhongxian turned to Yang Shi and said, "I have troubled you, Junior. There's no need to stand on ceremony. It's my pleasure to be able to do something for you," Yang Shi replied. Seeing how the #1 expert in the world was so courteous to Zhongxian, the Xingmeng Sword Saints remained in their stunned state. "You're too polite." Given that he was a celestial master teacher, Zhongxian was not too surprised by the incredibly respectful attitude that Yang Shi was treating him with. However, he shot a glance toward the latter to gesture for him to be low profile. The sharp Yang Shi swiftly understood the gesture, and his face reddened a little. After which, he turned his gaze to Zhao Ya and nodded in amazement. "Incredible. Senior, your means are indeed formidable. It hasn't been long since I left, but Zhao Ya has already fully recovered, and her cultivation has even advanced a notch. He had checked on Zhao Yue's personally, and he knew that all of her meridians had ruptured. Even with his abilities, he would have had no way of treating her at all. Yet, this senior of his had only taken 2 hours to completely heal her. As expected of a celestial master teacher, his means were indeed unfathomable. Zhongxian was silent for a moment before recalling that he had not resolved the problem concerning the Pavilion Master Seal yet. He turned back to Ren Qingyuan and said, "Pavilion Master Ren, it's not that I don't want to return the Pavilion Master Seal to you, but I was the one who asked my senior to take possession of the Pavilion Master Seal," Yongsha abruptly interjected. "Ren Qingyuan, you issued an arrest warrant without careful investigation, placing the Master Teacher Pavilion's impartiality and capability under question. With what you have done, if you continue holding on to the Pavilion Master Seal, you'll only diminish the Master Teacher Pavilion's authority and honor." I understand." Knowing that he was at fault for this matter as well, Ren Qingyuan could only shake his head. He beckoned the elders behind him and said, "Let's go." After mobilizing such a huge group of 9-star master teachers simultaneously, who would have thought that the matter would end in such a manner? Hold it right there. The master teachers barely managed to move a few steps before the crowd from the Combat Master Hall abruptly surrounded all of them. Ren Qingyuan turned to Zheng Yang and asked with a livid expression, "Progeny of combat, what do you mean by this? You did manage to resolve your issues, but my teacher's matter isn't over yet. You pinned such a grievous crime on my teacher, ordered his arrest, and even attempted to take his life. If we hadn't come in time, you would have already killed him in cold blood. After sullying my teacher's reputation, trampling on his dignity, and trying to assassinate him, don't you think that it's too convenient for you to leave just like that?" Zheng Yang glanced at the master teachers coldly as the spear in his hand trembled with a buzz. "Just because my teacher is compassionate enough to forgive the Master Teacher Pavilion doesn't mean that the rest of us are magnanimous enough to allow that. If you don't give us a good explanation today, don't dream about taking a single step out of here." Wei Ruyan stepped forward as her poison aura billowed around her. The Master Teacher Pavilion might have chosen to drop the arrest warrant on Zhongxian after he came to a peaceful agreement with the three powers, but that did not change the fact that the Master Teacher Pavilion had incompetently framed their teacher of crimes that he did not commit, sullying his innocence. There was no way that they could allow them to get away that easily, otherwise, their teacher's reputation would forever be stained by this incident. Since they had gathered together to bring their teacher justice, they should go all the way. Otherwise, what if others attempted it again in the future? Voila! After those two spoke up, Zhao Yue, Wang Ying, Lu Chong, and the others also walked over to encircle the master teachers. Powerful auras burst forth from them, sending a clear message to the Master Teacher Pavilion that they would not be allowed to leave until they gave a satisfactory answer. This. Ren Qingyuan's face twitched upon seeing this side. When had the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters fallen so far as to be cornered in such a manner? "Just what do you want?" A 9-star Master Teacher bellowed furiously. "Nothing much, we just want you to apologize, and the apology must reach every single Master Teacher Pavilion on the continent. Also, throw in 10 million or so pinnacle spirit stones, and we'll let this matter go," Yuan Dao said. Chapter 1555 Apologize, Master Teacher Pavilion. 10 million or so pinnacle spirit stones. The 9-star Master Teacher from before nearly exploded on the spot. This is daylight robbery. The other 9-star Master Teachers also glared at Yuan Dao furiously. Pinnacle spirit stones were an extremely rare commodity, such that not even the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters had the ability to take out 10 million or so pinnacle spirit stones. In their eyes, Yuan Dao's request was an insult to them. Daylight robbery? How could that be? We are all very reasonable people, and there's no way we'd resort to something as despicable as that. Chuckling softly, Yuan Dao turned around and said, "Comrades, if they aren't able to take out that many pinnacle spirit stones, let's just make do with taking their storage rings. While their master teacher robes are specially tailored by the headquarters and are bound to be very expensive, let's spare their dignity and not strip them clean, all right? After all, we are reasonable people, not common thieves." "You!" Hearing those words, the crowd from the master-teacher pavilion headquarters nearly blacked out. Is this still not considered daylight robbery? You are worse than a common thief, do you not know that? Unable to take it any longer, Ren Qingyuan turned to the young man idly watching the scene from afar and bellowed, "Zhongshe, is this your intention as well? All right, you lot should stop messing around." Seeing how mischievous his students were, Zhongxian waved his hands helplessly and said, "Junior Qingyuan, pardon me. It seems like I have failed to keep my students in line." Junior. Ren Qingyuan's goosebumps rose upon hearing that term. The matter regarding the storage rings is of course a joke. However, placing his hands behind his back, Zhongxian said, "I stand by what my students have said. I, Zhongxian, have always lived by my principles. I wouldn't be so brazen as to say that I have never faltered, but I have always tried my best to uphold the virtues of a teacher. Yet, the master-teacher pavilion headquarters has issued an arrest warrant on me, making me out to be an immoral villain who willfully caused damage and kidnapped others. If the master-teacher pavilion simply walks away after all the mistakes it has committed, I think that would really chill the hearts of the master teachers around the world. You. Very well, I admit that I have done you wrong this time around, and I am willing to accept my punishment. Speak your mind. As long as it's something that the master-teacher pavilion can afford, I'll try my best to compensate you." As furious as Ren Qingyuan was, he knew that what Zhongxian had said was right. Thus, he suppressed his anger and lowered his head. "I don't ask of you to compensate me, but it happens that there's something that the master-teacher pavilion has that I am deeply interested in. Having governed the master-teacher continent for many years, the master-teacher pavilion has amassed countless cultivation technique manuals. To be honest, I have long desired to access your collection so as to further my studies. If the master-teacher pavilion could be so kind as to provide me with a copy of all of its cultivation technique manuals from the dimension-sundering realm to just before the ancient sage realm, I would be extremely thankful," Zhongxian said. To him, there was no compensation that was as practical as cultivation technique manuals. With those, he would be able to compile corresponding Heaven's Path divine art manuals and advance his cultivation swiftly. The cultivation technique manuals of the master-teacher pavilion are confidential, so I can't show them to an outsider. "I will have to ask you to request something else of me," Ren Qingyuan replied. One of the reasons that the master-teacher pavilion was able to remain at the top of the continent for so many years was due to its massive repository of top-notch secret arts. Knowledge would only be powerful in the right hands, so the master-teacher pavilion only imparted the cultivation technique manuals to those with exceptional talent and good character. Furthermore, most of those secret arts were too domineering, such that without the guidance of the predecessors, not only would it be unlikely for one to master it, the chances of one's cultivation going berserk was extremely high as well. Even a 9-star master teacher would have to study the insights of the predecessors before carefully practicing it bit by bit. Thus, there had never been an occasion when all of the secret arts were copied down and given to someone. "I won't demand those cultivation techniques that are too profound or confidential. I'll just take those that the master-teacher pavilion is willing to impart to others, but I want as many of them as possible," Zhongxian said. While master teachers did embrace the idea of impartation to all without discrimination, there were limitations to how far they could do so. Most of the confidential secret arts passed down only within the lineages were extreme profound, and they would require special guidance in order to master. Carelessly passing on their secret arts to others would only encourage others to incorrectly practice the secrets that they had devoted their lives to developing and refining, and that was not something that they wanted to see. Back then, Kongsha had taught 3,000 students and 72 direct disciples, and the cultivation techniques that he had imparted to each of them was different from one another. The same went for Wang Ying, Zheng Yang, and the others. In fact, when he lectured all of them together back when they were still in Hongtian Academy, he had only imparted the most basic knowledge concerning cultivation to them. Beyond that, he had always chosen to tutor each of them individually. Hearing that Zhongxian did not require the more confidential cultivation techniques, Ren Qingyuan hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Very well then. However, I'd like to inform you beforehand that the Master Teacher Pavilion only has Saint 8 Dan and 9 Dan cultivation technique manuals. Beyond this realm, every cultivator will have to find their own way to forge a path forward, so there aren't any established cultivation techniques anymore. Furthermore, all of the cultivation technique manuals beyond the Saint realm that our Master Teacher Pavilion has are locked in the Azure Vault. If you wish to browse through it, you will have to enter the premises yourself. Hearing those words, Zhongxian shot a glance at Sword Saint Xing, and the latter confirmed Ren Qingyuan's words with a slight nod. Thus, he could only turn his gaze back and sigh helplessly. All right then, we have quite a number of Saint 8 Dan cultivation technique manuals on hand, so we can pass them over to you right now. As for the Saint 9 Dan manuals, most of them are in the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, so you will have to wait patiently for a moment as we copy them for you, Ren Qingyuan said. Considering the standing of the Master Teacher Pavilion, they would not stoop so low as to renege on their own words. Thus, Zhongxian gave a nod of agreement. I understand. So, Ren Qingyuan turned around and instructed, everyone, please pass all of the Saint 8 Dan cultivation technique manuals that you have to me. Yes, Pavilion Master Ren. The 9-star Master Teachers hurriedly took out their Saint 8 Dan cultivation technique manuals, and they added up to several thousand books. Ren Qingyuan stowed the books into a storage ring before passing them over to Zhongxian. Zhongshu, I'll take responsibility for the injustice that you have experienced today. Once I return to the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, I'll resign from my position as the Deputy Pavilion Master. I hope that this will be able to resolve the grudge that you have with the Master Teacher Pavilion. Knee-deep in this mess, the Master Teacher Pavilion could no longer make a clean getaway from this matter. In order to restore the dignity and reputation of the Master Teacher Pavilion, Ren Qingyuan had no choice but to shoulder all of the blame so as to absolve the Master Teacher Pavilion. But once he did that, there was no way that others would allow him to remain as the Deputy Pavilion Master. Rather than be criticized by the masses afterward, he decisively chose to resign from his position. After bowing deeply to Zhongxian and Yang Shi, Ren Qingyuan left with all of the 9-star Master Teachers. On the other hand, Zhongxian had not expected Ren Qingyuan to actually resign from his position over this matter, and he shook his head and sighed. At that moment, he suddenly recalled Yang Shi's abrupt interjection earlier, so he turned a doubtful gaze over to the latter. Junior. He had not told the other party anything about the Pavilion Master Seal, so why would the other party suddenly speak up on his behalf? Knowing what he wanted to ask, Yang Shi sent a telepathic message over. As a Celestial Master Teacher, you should be able to easily tame the Pavilion Master Seal. The reason you are unwilling to hand it over is because you have already tamed it, and it has already fused into your palm in the form of 3 droplets, right? Zhongxian nodded. It seemed like Yang Shi did know about the Pavilion Master Seal, so there was no need for him to waste his breath explaining the matter to him. Through the power of the droplets, you will be able to wield power unmatched by those beneath Ancient Sage. If I'm not mistaken, you were planning to reveal your identity as the Celestial Master Teacher earlier, right? Yang Shi continued. Zhongxian nodded before asking, is there anything wrong with that? The reason he had not dared to reveal his identity as a Celestial Master Teacher before was because he had been too weak. He had been afraid that the otherworldly demonic tribe would devote its effort to assassinating him once they learned of the matter, and he did not feel safe entrusting his safety to others. However, having tamed the Pavilion Master Seal, as long as he activated the power of the droplets, he would be able to wield strength unmatched by all beneath Ancient Say. Surely, it should be fine for him to reveal his identity as the Celestial Master Teacher with the strength he currently possessed, should it not? After all, he would be granted access to the massive trove of resources that the Master Teacher Pavilion had once he revealed his identity, thus allowing him to advance his cultivation faster than ever. Was there really a need for him to continue concealing the matter? Senior, I know what you are thinking, and I'll be very frank with you. We have recently found that one of the strongest otherworldly demonic emperors is currently on the Master Teacher continent, Yang Shi said grimly. At this point, we are still unable to confirm the intention behind this course of action. However, if the news concerning you being the Celestial Master Teacher is leaked now, there's no doubt that you will be in grave danger. Grave danger. How powerful is the otherworldly demonic emperor? Zhong Xian asked. He was invincible among those beneath ancient sage, and while he was not too sure of the matter, it seemed like it was impossible for any cultivators to make a breakthrough to ancient sage anymore. With that, there should be no one on the master-teacher continent who was more powerful than him. I'm afraid that the otherworldly demonic emperor's cultivation has already reached. Yang Shi looked in the sky with an apprehensive frown on his face. Ancient sage. Chapter 1556 The Secrets of the Master-Teacher Continent. Ancient Sage? Zhong Xian narrowed his eyes in shock, not daring to believe what he had heard. Didn't you say that it's impossible for anyone to make a breakthrough beyond ancient sage anymore? Previously, Yang Shi had stated that it was no longer possible for anyone to make a breakthrough to ancient sage. Even he himself had reached a bottleneck in his cultivation, and the reason he had chosen to roam the world was to search for inspiration that could possibly allow him to make a breakthrough. Since that was the case, how could that otherworldly demonic emperor be so powerful? When I said that he has reached ancient sage, I fear that's only a conservative estimate on my part. Yang Shi shook his head worriedly. There's a good chance that his cultivation is far higher than that. Seeing that Zhong Xian was confused by the seeming contradiction in his words, Yang Shi paused for a moment before explaining, it's true that it's nigh impossible for cultivators to make a breakthrough to ancient sage, but the otherworldly demons are of a different level of existence from us humans. Given the difference in our constitutions, how they achieve a breakthrough is drastically different to how we break through, so I can't say for sure whether they are still able to make a breakthrough to ancient sage or not. However, I can tell you for certain that this particular otherworldly demonic emperor did not make a breakthrough in the last 10,000 years. What do you mean by that? Zhong Xian was still unable to make sense out of what he was hearing. If the otherworldly demonic emperor did not make a breakthrough in the recent 10,000 years, did that not mean that the other party had already been an ancient sage 10,000 years ago? But surely that could not be. As powerful as ancient sages were, there was still a limit to their lifespan. Otherwise, Kong Shi and his disciples would not have disappeared without a trace either. In fact, I suspect that this otherworldly demonic emperor could very well be the same one that fought with Kong Shi back then. Yang Shi said with deeply narrowed eyes. The one that fought with Kong Shi back then? This. Zhong Xian's eyes widened in shock. But Kong Shi departed from the continent tens of thousands of years ago, no? Was it really possible for the otherworldly demon emperor who had fought with Kong Shi tens of thousands of years ago to still be alive? In the first place, the otherworldly demons enjoy greater longevity than us humans, and they might have used some sort of secret art that allows them to hibernate for long periods of time. As such, we can't discount the possibility that this otherworldly demonic emperor is still alive. Yang Shi explained. In fact, there are many powerhouses of the master-teacher continent that have lived through the ages in such a way as well. Those words immediately rose a great storm in Zhong Xian's heart. It seemed like he had underestimated the ancient sages. He had thought that once a person reached the limits of their lifespan, whether they were a human or an otherworldly demon, they had no choice but to accept his death. Who would have thought that there would actually be such a secret art to extend their lifespan? Then again, Vicious was the very embodiment of this. He had fought with Kong Shi back then, but even tens of thousands of years later, he had still successfully been brought back to life. He had no idea how powerful Vicious was in the otherworldly demonic tribe, but considering the high opinion that Yang Shi had of that otherworldly demonic emperor, they should be of equal standing at the very least. Given so, it should not come as much of a surprise that this otherworldly demonic emperor was still alive. My guess is that this otherworldly demonic emperor has sneaked into the master-teacher continent for the great codex of spring and autumn. Currently, not even the master-teacher pavilion has been able to acquire any information concerning his whereabouts. As such, it would be best to remain prudent. You are only mankind's second celestial master-teacher, and if that otherworldly demon emperor catches wind of your existence, I'm afraid that it will be difficult for us to stop him with our current strength. Yang Shi said worriedly. I understand. Zhong Xian nodded. Given that he had hidden his identity as the celestial master teacher for so long, he had no qualms with keeping it a secret a little bit longer. Just that, He really did not expect the otherworldly demonic tribe to still have such a powerful expert among them. But if the otherworldly demonic emperor is that powerful, and the master-teacher continent no longer has any ancient sages, why hasn't the otherworldly demonic tribe conquered it yet? It's their dream, isn't it? Considering that mankind was already without Kong Shi and his disciples, it should not be too difficult for that ancient sage otherworldly demonic emperor to lead his men over to conquer the master-teacher continent once more. That should be the rational course of action, should it not? They have tried to invade the master-teacher continent many times, but it isn't as easy as that. While it's possible for the otherworldly demons to slip through the seals in the subterranean galleries, they have to pay a heavy price for that. As such, it isn't easy for them to amass their armies in the master-teacher continent, Yangsha explained. Furthermore, while no humans have been able to achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage anymore, that doesn't mean that we don't have any ancient sages among us. What? Zhongxian blinked blankly, not following Yangsha's words. If it was impossible to achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage, how could there still be any human ancient sage cultivators in the world? Didn't I say it earlier? There are many powerhouses on the master-teacher continent that have used a secret art to survive through the ages. In fact, the reason even the master-teacher pavilion headquarters has to tread prudently around the Zhong clan is because the Zhong clan also has an ancient sage who survived in such a way. However, the ancient sages are in a state of hibernation most of the time, and only when the master-teacher continent is truly in danger will they be awakened. Yangsha replied. The Zhong clan also has an ancient sage? Zhongxian was shocked. He had always thought that the strongest experts in the Zhong clan were Sword Saint Xing and Sword Saint Meng. Who could have thought that they would actually have such a powerful trump card? Indeed. This is one of the greatest secrets of the continent, and only 9-star master teachers are qualified to learn of the matter. Senior, I have to ask you not to speak of it lightly to others. Yangsha clasped his fist. Rest assured, I understand. Zhongxian replied. The ancient sages of mankind are usually in a state of hibernation. They are woken only when there's a battle to be fought, and they return to hibernation right after. For every battle they undergo, their lifespan will be reduced significantly. Eventually, they will run out of time and breathe their last breath. Every single ancient sage is of the utmost importance to the safety of mankind, so we can't afford to wake any of them up in order to protect you. Since your identity as the Celestial Master Teacher hasn't been leaked yet, it would be best to keep it a secret for as long as we can. Furthermore, we still have no idea what the otherworldly demonic emperor looks like, where he currently is, and in what form the danger from him will manifest. Even if we had an ancient sage constantly following you around, it would still be difficult to guarantee your safety. Speaking up to this point, Yangsha suddenly paused for a moment as he looked at Zhongxian earnestly. Any of us can die, but senior, you must continue living. You are the Celestial Master Teacher, an existence on par with Kong Shi. You are the hope of mankind. Whether mankind will be able to rise once more and enter another era of prosperity depends on you. Zhongxian's heart jolted in astonishment. He did not think that Yangsha would have such a high opinion of him. He was silent for a moment before nodding. I understand. At the same time, he felt incredibly relieved that he had never revealed his identity as the Celestial Master Teacher carelessly. Otherwise, if he had really caught the eye of that otherworldly demonic emperor whom Yangsha had mentioned, he would probably have been killed in a heartbeat. Junior, you said earlier that this otherworldly demonic emperor has come for the Great Codex of Spring and Autumn. Can you explain more about that matter? Zhongxian asked. The Great Codex of Spring-Autumn was known to be the strongest artifact that Kong Shi had created, and it wielded unimaginable capabilities. Previously, he had come across the Qingtian Emperor, who had been searching for the celestial amulet of legacy for this very purpose. As you might have heard, the Great Codex of Spring and Autumn is an unparalleled artifact that Kong Shi left behind. It has the ability to affect the weather and control time. Before Kong Shi left the continent, he placed the artifact in the Temple of Confucius in Tsufu. Unfortunately, no one knows the exact location of where the Temple of Confucius is. Countless master teachers have attempted to find it, but none of them succeeded. Legend has it that only by gathering all of the celestial amulets of legacy together will the road leading to the Temple of Confucius finally appear. However, a year ago, we detected some spatial distortions in Tsufu, and someone reportedly witnessed a mirage of the Temple of Confucius. As soon as the news came out, it caused a huge commotion among the upper echelons of the Master-Teacher continent. The Master-Teacher Pavilion moved quickly to seal the news completely, but unfortunately, it seems like the otherworldly demonic tribe still managed to catch wind of it. The Great Codex of Spring and Autumn is an unparalleled treasure, and if we successfully obtain it, we'll have a powerful weapon in our hands to protect ourselves. However, if the otherworldly demonic tribe obtains it instead, there's a good chance that they could use it to tear down the seals in the subterranean galleries and march back into the continent. If that happens, it would be a catastrophe, Yang Shi said grimly. If it's an artifact that Kong Shi forged, why did he choose to seal it in the Temple of Confucius instead of entrusting it to the Master-Teacher Pavilion? Zhong Xian asked with a doubtful frown. Since it was a creation from Kong Shi, it went without saying that he intended to pass it down to future generations so as to benefit mankind. Yet, instead of handing this artifact over to the Master-Teacher Pavilion to use it, he chose to seal it up instead. This did not seem to make sense. I don't know the exact reason either. Most probably, we'll only know after entering the Temple of Confucius, Yang Shi said. Tsufu is Kongzi's real hometown, and it's a real city in China. By the way, the real Temple of Confucius is in Tsufu as well. Chapter 1557. Returning to the Zhong clan. A matter concerning the Temple of Confucius was already way beyond what Yang Shi could access. The matter had happened tens of thousands of years ago, and no matter how carefully the Master-Teacher Pavilion passed down its heritage from one generation to the next, there was still bound to be some information that was withheld or lost in the process. With the limited information he knew, all he could do was speculate. And since it was just mere speculation, it would be better for him to hold his tongue than to spread uncertain information. On the other hand, seeing that Yang Shi was uncertain of the matter, Zhong Xian decided to ask no more as well. The two of them chatted a while longer before Sword Saint Xing suddenly walked over and said, Yang Shi, we are very thankful to you for helping us reunite with Xian'er. We wish to bring him back home now to acknowledge the ancestors. Would you be interested in following us along so as to witness the process? Yang Shi nodded. I happen to have something that I have to do back at the Zhong clan. Let's head over together. Great. Let's set off then. Seeing that Yang Shi was coming along as well, Sword Saint Xing inwardly heaved a sigh of relief before turning to Zhong Xian. We'll first be heading to the Glacier Plain Court to teleport to the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters before teleporting to the Zhong clan. There's no need to go through that much trouble. I can just set up a teleportation formation straight back to the Zhong clan here, Zhong Xian replied with a smile. While the power from the droplet had already faded, with his current dimension sundering realm primary stage cultivation and the assistance from Yang Shi and the Xingmeng Sword Saints, it would not be too difficult for him to construct another teleportation formation. In any case, he had been to the Zhong clan once before, so he knew its coordinates very well. As long as he calculated carefully, he should be able to arrive at the destination with pinpoint accuracy. That would be great. It was only after hearing those words that the crowd suddenly remembered the young man's ability to set up teleportation formations with a wave of his hand, and they quickly nodded in agreement. Before that, allow me to talk to my students a while first. Since Zhong Xian had already decided to head to the Zhong clan, there was no longer any need for him to hesitate. He quickly headed to where Zhao Ya, Zheng Yang, and the others had gathered. Teacher. With the crisis resolved, they were no longer able to suppress the longing that they felt, and they quickly gathered around Zhong Xian in agitation. If not for their teacher, they would still have been living their lives groggily in the remote Tianxian kingdom. They would never have grown to become the formidable powerhouses that they were that day. They would never forget what their teacher had done for them. Not bad. Looking at the faces before him, Zhong Xian could not help but smile hearteningly. Those immature children that had waddled behind him in the past had become figures who could stand their own ground. There was indeed nothing constant in the world except for the passing of time. After chatting for a bit, Zhongxian turned to the spear-wielding young man and asked, Zheng Yang, how did you manage to grow so quickly? Wei Ruyan had been able to advance her cultivation swiftly due to her innate poison constitution, and the same applied to Zhao Ya, Lu Chong, and Yuan Dao as well. While Wang Ying did improve considerably, her strength was mainly derived from her spirit enchantment art and the puppet that she commanded. Yet, it was Zheng Yang, who only had hard work to count on, who had improved the quickest among them, such that even Ren Qingyuan would hesitate to face him. Teacher, I only managed to improve so quickly due to the Master Teacher Pavilion's Hall of Spring and Autumn, Zheng Yang replied honestly. Hall of Spring and Autumn? Zhongxian muttered. It's a unique artifact of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, and it's said to have been left behind by Kongsha as well. It's somewhat similar to the blood reservoir of the Zhong clan, but it's more advanced than that. A year inside the Hall of Spring and Autumn translates to only the passing of a month outside. I spent a total of 3 months inside, which is equivalent to the passing of 3 years, with the Combat Master Hall generously supplying whatever I needed for my cultivation, Zheng Yang said. I see. Zhongxian nodded in realization. It was no wonder the other party had grown so much within just a couple of months, such that even Zhao Ya and the others were not able to catch up to him. It turned out that the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters still had such a formidable artifact with them. With the slowing of time, Zheng Yang's diligence, the heritage of the Combat Master Hall, and the vast resources devoted to him, it was understandable that he had grown so quickly within such a short period of time. The Zhong clan's blood reservoir only allowed one to cultivate mentally, but the effects of the Hall of Spring and Autumn applied to the cultivator as a whole. Naturally, there was a vast difference in the effects as well. As they chatted and chatted, before they knew it, the sky had already begun to dim. Seeing that it was getting late, Zhongxian said, all of you are already leaders of your respective organizations, so you can't follow me as you did in the past anymore. Your people need you, so return to them. I'm not in any danger anymore, so there's no need to be worried about me. He knew that his students missed him, and he missed them as well. However, their circumstances were different from before, and they could not afford to act willfully. They had each found their own way forward, so it was inevitable that their paths would have to diverge. We understand, but it's just that we can't bear to. The thought of separation after barely reuniting with one another made Zhao Ya's eyes redden slightly. She had thought that she would be able to remain with her teacher a little longer, but to think that they would have to separate so soon again. Zhao Ya, even though I have helped you reconstruct your meridians, your foundations are still a little weak at the moment. Here is a cultivation technique manual that I have just written. Cultivate according to it, and it'll do you much good for your future cultivation. Zheng Yang, the heritage of the Combat Master Hall isn't too bad, but due to the swift advancement in your cultivation, you ended up incurring some traumas. I have a prescription over here. Get a skilled apothecary to forge the pills for you according to my prescription. Consume 1 a day for a week straight, and it should resolve the traumas that you have sustained and advance your cultivation further. Wang Ying, your talent is lacking in comparison to Zhao Ya and the others, and you haven't been blessed with the same fortuitous encounter as Zheng Yang. Here are the cultivation technique manuals that I have compiled for you recently, as well as the insights I have regarding spirit enchantment. I'll entrust all of them to you, and as long as you practice them diligently, you should be able to improve quickly as well. Lu Chong, Wei Ruyan, Yuan Dao. Zhongxian carefully went through the problems with each of his students' cultivation, but even after doing so, he still felt a little worried. Thus, he left several surges of Heaven's Path Zhenqi in each of them before finally heaving a sigh of relief. They might have matured and grown even stronger than him, but somehow, he could not help but see them as children that needed taking care of. Teacher, since you are intending to head to the Luo clan very soon to seal your engagement, let's meet again in the Luo clan, Zheng Yang said with a smile. I'll bring a huge present then to celebrate the occasion. Indeed. How can we be absent for our teacher's marriage? Wei Ruyan chuckled softly. We'll definitely be there. Zhao Ya and the others nodded in agreement. Seeing the earnest faces all around him, Zhongxian shook his head helplessly and said, all right, feel free to come if you want to. Right, There's a matter that I need to entrust you all with. Liu Yang disappeared after leaving Qingyuan City, so I would like you to help me keep a lookout for him. If you find him, make sure that no danger befalls him. Recalling that disciple of his who had left to venture into the world, Zhongxian could not help but feel a little worried. All right. The others nodded in agreement. While they had been chatting, the elders of the Spirit Awakener Guild had already moved the enchanted buildings back to where they belonged, and the experts of the Poison Hall had also cured the poisoned master teachers and released them. By the time that Zhongxian parted with his students, night had fallen. Let's go. Knowing that Zhongxian was not in a mood to chat, Sword Saint Meng did not bother him too much. She took out a bunch of grade 9 formation flags and passed them over. Taking the formation flags, Zhongxian quickly calculated the coordinates of the Zhong clan and began constructing the teleportation formation. Due to his lacking cultivation, he still needed Yang Shi's assistance before he finally activated the teleportation formation successfully. Who? The group vanished on the spot, and the next instant, they were standing right before the Zhong clan's entrance formation. Usually, you only address someone with if you are their senior and on close terms with them. In Yu Fei's case though, is simply part of her name. Chapter 1558 News reaches the Luo clan. In the Luo clan, before a massive seal, a young lady pleaded with a desperate look on her face, "Elder brother, please let me go. I'll come right back after saving him." With her black, silky hair and a delicate complexion that looked as if it would tear with a gust of wind, she was indescribably beautiful, almost as though a goddess that had descended to the mortal world. Words could not even begin to describe her ravishing looks. Standing before her was a young man in his early 30s, Luo Shenqing. "You should abandon that thought, Yusin. The only reason I was allowed to return using the teleportation formation was to stop you from messing around." Looking into his younger sister's pleading eyes, Luo Xuanqing's heart ached a little. However, he still toughened his resolve and shook his head adamantly. He brought this upon himself. If he's able to survive the ordeal, I'll believe that he truly has the ability to marry you. However, there's no need for you to be too worried about him. Since the Master-Teacher Pavilion has gotten involved, I don't think that they will go too far. At the very most, they will only punish him harshly. There shouldn't be any threat to his life. Is that so? Hearing her elder brother's words, the young lady heaved a sigh of relief. As long as there's no danger to his life, I believe that he will be able to overcome the crisis eventually. Geez. I really don't know what kind of sorcery that lad used to charm you so. Staring at the infatuated look on his younger sister's face, Luo Shenqing could not help but shake his head. He had interacted with Zhongxian on many occasions, so he had a clear idea about the means that the young man possessed. While he was formidable, faced against a behemoth like the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters, it was unlikely that he would stand much of a chance. Even if there was no danger to the young man's life, chances were that he would be put through great suffering. He really could not understand why his younger sister had so much confidence in him. "It's not sorcery. I simply trust him," the young lady replied. "It doesn't matter whether you trust him or not. It's not as if you don't know our clan's resolve on this matter, and you should understand the severe implications that could arise from this matter. They won't allow you to marry anyone other than the young prodigy of the Zhong clan. There's no future between you and him." Luo Shenqing sighed as he lowered his gaze to the ground, not wanting to see his younger sister's disappointed face. The deeper the feelings his younger sister had for that fellow, the greater the disappointment she would eventually face. The marriage between the Zhong and the Luo clan would affect the Master-Teacher Pavilion, the Celestial Amulet of Legacy, and the Great Codex of Spring and Autumn. They would not allow any problems to occur just because of her personal feelings. I know that there's no future between me and him. As long as he's safe, I'll be content," the young lady replied quietly as she hugged her knees to her body. Geez. Luo Shenqing wanted to knock some sense into his younger sister, but seeing the forlorn look on her face, he really could not bring himself to put her down any more than that. She had always been lonely despite the crowds of people that swarmed around her. It had not been easy for her to find someone whom she truly liked. Even if there was nothing but tragedy in the end, perhaps it might be good to allow her to live in the moment. In that moment of heavy silence between the two of them, flurried footsteps sounded from the distance, and soon, a figure could be seen rushing over. Young master, little princess. Upon catching a clearer sight of the figure, Luo Xianqing anxiously asked, Elder Chengxian, what's wrong? He was none other than the Luo clan expert who had threatened Zhong Xian back in Qingyuan City, Luo Chengxian. At this moment, his face was flushed red in agitation, as if he had heard some news that even he had difficulty believing. Young master, I have been keeping a close eye on the situation over in the Empire Alliance, and I have just received some news from my men there. After Zhong Shi was cornered by the experts of the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters, there should have been no way that he could have escaped. However, at the crucial moment, his students appeared. Luo Chengxian reported. His students? Are you referring to Wang Ying and the others? The young lady asked anxiously. That's right. The first one to arrive was the head of the Poison Hall, followed by a Soul Oracle, the leader of the Spirit Awakener Guild. As he reported the news that he had just received, Luo Chengxian could not help but gulp unconsciously. He had verified the matter again and again, but still, he could not help but find it too incredible to be true. You are telling me that the students that fellow took in have become the head of the Poison Hall, the leader of the Spirit Awakener Guild, the master of the Combat Master Hall, the head of the Yuan clan. Luo Xianqing widened his eyes in disbelief. Those were major powers that did not pale much in comparison to the Luo clan, and yet, they were all headed by his student. Was Zhong Xian not only a phantasmal space realm cultivator himself? How could his students be so formidable? That isn't all. Sword Saint Xing and Sword Saint Meng from the Zhong clan also arrived shortly afterward. Luo Chengxian continued. After fighting an intense battle with Zhong Shi, Sword Saint Xing admitted his defeat and said that. Seeing how Luo Chengxian was stuttering to no end, Luo Xianqing frowned in displeasure. What did he say? He said that Zhong Shi was actually his son. In other words, he's the young prodigy who hasn't appeared all this time, Luo Chengxian exclaimed with eyes widened in disbelief. When he first saw this piece of news, he had thought that his eyes were playing tricks on him. He had needed to carefully read it 8 times and verify it again and again before he was able to confirm that there was no mistake. Nevertheless, he still could not help but feel as if he was in a dream when speaking of it. It was simply too unbelievable. It had not been easy for the little princess to find someone whom she fancied, but the heavy responsibility that she shouldered had made it impossible for them to come together. Yet, who would have thought that her fiancé would turn out be the person whom she fancied? What did you say? Luo Xianqing fell into a daze. The little princess's body also stiffened upon hearing those words. Her voice quivered in disbelief as she asked, Did you say that? Zhong Shi is the young prodigy of the Zhong clan? Yes. I have verified the information many times, so there can't be any mistake with it. I've heard that our first elder is rushing back to the clan because of the matter, and I believe it won't be long before news spreads all around our clan. Luo Chengxian nodded in agitation. He was the old butler of the little princess, and he had been taking care of her ever since she was young. Due to that, he had a clear idea of what her temperament was like. It was precisely out of worry for her that he secretly went to look for Zhong Xian in order to warn him. He had thought that since it was impossible for them to get together, it would be better to sever their relationship as quickly as possible so as to lessen the pain. However, when he found out that the little princess could really be together with the person whom she liked, the excitement and delight that he felt was no less than what the two people in question felt. This. That fellow is actually the young prodigy. Unable to contain his agitation, Luo Xianqing punched the air excitedly. In his head, the image of the young prodigy whom he had hated with a passion slowly overlapped together with Zhong Xian's figure, and soon, an indescribable sense of joy rippled through his body, washing away all of his fatigue. The reason he hated the young prodigy previously was because he knew that his younger sister was likely to suffer in this political marriage. Marrying someone whom she did not love, she could come to regret it for life. However, if Zhong Xian was the young prodigy, that would no longer be the case. They had mutual feelings for one another, and as an elder brother, It went without saying that his younger sister finding her own happiness was something that was worth celebrating. Zhongshe. Upon learning that the person whom she was engaged with was actually the person whom she fancied, the worries and hesitation that had plagued the young lady in recent days was suddenly swept clean. Before she knew it, her vision blurred. Tears were already streaming down her face. With this engagement between them, she would finally be able to be with him openly. There was no need for her to be afraid of anything anymore. All of a sudden, she remembered something and hurriedly wiped away her tears. She turned to Luo Chengxian and asked nervously, "How did he react after learning that he's the young prodigy of the Zhong clan?" It goes without saying that he's overjoyed. It seems like he has even made a promise with our first elder that after acknowledging the ancestors of the Zhong clan, he will immediately head over to ask for your hand in marriage. Luo Chengxian said. "He's heading over to ask for my hand in marriage?" The young lady's face instantaneously turned bright red, but her brilliant eyes reflected deep expectations for the future ahead. "I'll be waiting." Chapter 1559. The whole world in uproar. As a newly promoted empire, the Shenyuan Empire did not stand out among the many empires. However, it was one of the few empires that were extremely successful at attracting talents all over the world, allowing it to develop at an incredible pace. In just half a year, it had already become one of the more outstanding Tier 2 empires, well beyond the league of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. At this very moment, Empress Mo Yu was seated on her royal throne, assessing the crowd beneath her regally. "Don't you all have a lot of opinions usually? Why aren't any of you speaking today?" One of the officials stepped forward and exclaimed, "Your Majesty, we can't afford to interfere recklessly in this matter. If we help Zhongshe, that would be equivalent to opposing the Master-Teacher Pavilion. That could very well revert our newly promoted empire back into a mere kingdom. I disagree with Minister Chen's viewpoint. Were it not for Zhongshe, our Shenyuan kingdom never would have been successfully promoted into an empire. If we remain silent while our benefactor is being insulted by others, how will our people view us?" said another official as he stepped forward. "I am of the same opinion as Censor Li's opinion. If it had been another master teacher, we might still have been able to turn a blind eye to the matter, but it's Zhongshe that we are talking about over here. Back then, he went to great lengths in order to develop our Shenyuan kingdom into an empire, so we can't simply leave him in the lurch now that he's in need of help. That would chill the hearts of our people. Given our strength, what can we possibly do for Zhongshe? Do you think that our Shenyuan Empire has the power to oppose a decision made by the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters? We'll only be destroyed. Even if we can't do anything much, I don't want others to view our Shenyuan Empire as an ungrateful country that forgets its benefactors. Even if you wish to repay the debt, you can't just drag our entire Shenyuan Empire into the flames like that. Enough." Looking at the chaos below, Empress Mo Yu abruptly rose to her feet and bellowed, "Zhongshe must be saved. This is my decision. Censor Li, I want you to start a petition using my name and rally everyone in the empire who is indebted to Zhongshe. So what if the other party is the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters? If they have made a mistake, we ought to speak up against them. Yes." Hearing that the Empress had already made her decision, the arguing officials lowered their heads subserviently, not daring to argue anymore. "Your Majesty." Just as Censor Li was about to begin drafting a petition, a fully armored general rushed into the palace and anxiously reported, "I have just received news that Zhongshe has managed to resolve the crisis and is fine." "You said that Zhongshe is fine?" Mo Yu hurriedly took the letter that the other party was passing over and opened it. Slowly, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Zhongshe is actually the head of one of the premier sage clans, the Zhong clan? And Zhao Ya is the court chief of the Glacier Plain Court, wielding strength that even Pavilion Master Ren had trouble dealing with? That lass, Wang Ying, has become the leader of the Spirit Awakener Guild. Zheng Yang is the new progeny of combat of the Combat Master Hall, and that fatty, Yuan Dao, had actually become the head of the Yuan clan. Even Lu Chong has grown into a Master Soul Oracle, capable of standing his ground against 9-star master teachers." Mo Yu could not help but wonder in her heart, if I had relinquished my royalty and followed him back then, would I have already become a top-notch expert of the continent, too? Back then, Zhao Ya, Wang Ying, Zheng Yang, and the others had been far weaker than her, not even coming close to being a match for her. Yet, in the short span of a single year, they had become figures whom she could only look up to. She had known all along that it was only a matter of time before someone of Zhongsha's caliber rose to the top, but who could have thought that even his students would become experts standing at the zenith of the continent as well? It's a pity, but it seems like I have already missed my opportunity to do so. Mo Yu lowered her head with a hint of sorrow in the depths of her eyes. She had viewed being the empress of the Shenyuan Empire as a great honor, but it was becoming apparent that even this honor might not come close to being a humble student behind Zhongxian. Mo Yu shook her head and muttered, "It looks the master-teacher continent will be Zhongsha's in the future." White clouds drifted amid the mountain range. By a mountain stream, a young lady was seated atop a small boulder with a worried look in her eyes. Yu Feiya. Shortly after leaving Qingyuan City, Yu Feiya stumbled by 9-star master teacher Ji Ruochen and became her student. "Junior, our teacher told me to bring this letter to you." A young man suddenly flew over from the distance and placed an envelope in her hand. Yu Feiya anxiously tore it open, and upon swiftly browsing through it, her body stiffened in shock. If he's the young prodigy of the Zhong clan, doesn't that mean that? Indeed, Junior, Zhongxian is indeed a person of great talent. Not only does he possess extraordinary abilities, all of his students are outstanding. Even our teacher is filled with respect and praise for him, the young man exclaimed in agitation. It won't be long before his name is known throughout the entire continent. Why yes, you're right. Yu Feiya replied with a dazed look on her face, seemingly contemplating something deeply. In the Jiang clan, a middle-aged man turned around with a flabbergasted look on his face after hearing an elder's report. "You said that Zhongxian single-handedly fended off the pursuers from the master-teacher pavilion headquarters, and in the blink of an eye, he became the head of the Zhong clan. Furthermore, his students are also powerhouses of the continent, possessing great power, too?" "That's right, clan head. Prepare some gifts and send them over to the Zhong clan to congratulate them for finding their son. Wait, they are intending to head to the Luo clan to ask for the little princess's hand in marriage, right? Deliver the presents straight to the Luo clan and relay my blessings to them." "No, that won't do either." The middle-aged man waved his hand grandly. "I shall make a trip personally." In the Mu clan, Mu Yuan had been kneeling outside the manor, not moving in the slightest. In order to be accepted back into his clan, he had been kneeling on the spot for 10 days straight, but not a single person had bothered to pay him any heed. Even when he tried to beg with the butler, the latter had simply disregarded him. He had never faced such treatment back when he was still a genius from the Mu clan. However, he could not complain about it. He knew that he was the one who had done wrong back then. As long as the Mu clan was willing to take him back, putting aside 10 days, he would wait for as long as he needed. Enduring the fatigue in his body, Mu Yuan gritted his teeth tightly. Jia. Just as he was about to reach his limit, the massive doors of the Mu clan suddenly creaked open, and the head of the Mu clan rushed out. "Quick, get up." The clan head quickly walked over to Mu Yuan to support him up before feeding him a recovery pill. As soon as he swallowed the pill, Mu Yuan immediately felt incredible energy coursing through his body. In an instant, the fatigue that he had accumulated over the past few days vanished without a trace. "This is a grade 9 pill?" Mu Yuan jolted in alarm. Even when he was still a genius of the Mu clan, he had not been qualified to consume such pills. Yet, after his heinous deeds, the head of the Mu clan had still fed such a pill to him. "Mu Yuan, I have looked through your experiences over those years, and I noticed that you were under Zhongsha's care for some time. All right, I'll allow you to return to the Mu clan and grant you a suitable position within the clan. Zhongsha will be heading to the Luo clan to ask for the little princess's hand in marriage, so I want you to head over in representation of our Mu clan and present him with our congratulatory gift," the clan head said with a smile. "Zhongsha? Which Zhongsha?" Mu Yuan was a little overwhelmed by the situation. "Who else could I be referring to other than Zhongxian? You probably haven't heard yet. He's actually the young prodigy of the Zhong clan, as well as its clan head," the clan head replied. Zhong has become the head of the Zhong clan, and is actually the young prodigy at that. Mu Yuan was stunned. All of a sudden, he understood the reason behind the clan head's abrupt change in attitude. It turned out that the turning point of the matter was his link with Zhong. It was Zhong who had changed the course of his destiny. The same scene was playing out among most powers in the top echelons of the master-teacher continent. On that day, there was a name that was imprinted in the minds of those all across the master-teacher continent. Everyone had come to know of the master-teacher named Zhong. Some were delighted to learn of the matter, some despaired after hearing about it, and some were simply nonchalant, but without a doubt, his name would continue to resound on the master-teacher continent for many years to come. Chapter 1560. I didn't hear clearly. Seeing the newly repaired buildings and halls before him, Sword Saint Xing exclaimed with a smile, "We're home." It should have been the same Zhong clan as before, but it did not seem that way to Zhong anymore. A few days ago, when he came over, the only thought on his mind had been to teach the young prodigy a lesson and give the Zhong clan a piece of his mind. However, when he learned that the young prodigy was actually him and the Zhong clan that he had hated all along was actually his clan, honestly, he still was not too sure how he should feel about the matter. If only I'd found you earlier, this mess wouldn't have occurred. Recalling the tragedy that he had witnessed when he returned to the Zhong clan back then, Sword Saint Xing could not help but shake his head. With Zhong's current standing, no member of the Zhong clan would dare oppose him anymore. However, due to the events before, it was inevitable that most members of the Zhong clan would have some reservations or even bear hostility toward him. "Isn't this fine, too?" Sword Saint Meng harumphed coldly. "Your Zhong clan has grown arrogant over the years, acting all high and mighty just because of that #1 sage clan title. I have always despised that of the Zhong clan. I'd say that our Xiena did well stirring them up a little. That will make them learn that the bloodline that they are so proud of is not even worth mentioning." Sword Saint Xing knew better than to argue with his hot-tempered wife at this moment, so he could only shake his head helplessly and concede defeat. "Yes, my dear. You are always right." With Sword Saint Xing at the lead, the group managed to proceed ahead without any impediment, and very soon, they arrived at the Zhong clan's conference hall. This was where Zhong had clashed with the first elder several days ago. The buildings that had been destroyed in that encounter had already been repaired, and they looked exactly the same as before, betraying no signs of the devastation that had occurred just a few days ago. Noticing the doubtful look on Zhong's face, Sword Saint Xing discreetly explained through Zhenqi telepathy. "Your mother has rampaged in the Zhong clan a few times in the past, destroying quite a number of buildings each time. For that, the Zhong clan has specially employed a group of landscapers to conduct emergency repairs whenever required." Hearing that his mother was actually a harbinger of destruction as well, Zhong's face twitched slightly. To be honest, the destruction that he caused was always circumstantial. Unlike his mother's intentional actions, it was always due to a series of coincidences coming together in an unfortunate manner that resulted in tragedy for him. Welcoming the return of our deputy clan head and the young prodigy, as soon as they stepped into the hall, Zhong heard a voice echoing from within. Lifting his head, he saw the elders of the Zhong clan standing within, waiting patiently for their arrival. Sword Saint Xing nodded to acknowledge the greeting before walking straight to the main seat. Under normal circumstances, with Yang Shi's standing, he should have been accorded the highest seat in the room. However, due to him acknowledging Zhong as his senior, that put the Xingmeng Sword Saints a generation above him, so he could only make do with the seat at the very back. Sword Saint Xing looked at the elders before him and said, "I believe that all of you should have heard by now that Zhong is the young prodigy of our Zhong clan, who went missing 20 years ago. Since he has finally returned to our Zhong clan, I'll have to trouble you all to prepare the tributes and make arrangements for the acknowledgement ritual. Tomorrow morning, we'll first pay respects to the ancestors before holding the inauguration ceremony." "Inauguration ceremony? Clan head, do you mean to say that you intend to pass down the clan head position to the young prodigy tomorrow? Isn't that a little too fast?" The elders were caught off guard by the sudden announcement. With the return of the young prodigy, it was only a matter of time before Sword Saint Xing passed down his position to him. However, This was a little too rushed. Zhong Xian had only just returned to the Zhong clan, so he was unlikely to know anything about the current state of affairs surrounding it. Was he really in a good position to be making the final calls in the Zhong clan? If anything, it seemed like he would only lead the Zhong clan into a spiral of decline. Someone from the crowd suddenly bellowed, "I oppose it." The gazes in the room swiftly turned toward the source of the objection, and following that, the first elder Zhong Wuheng stepped out from the crowd. Upon seeing that it was him, Sword Saint Xing frowned. He had ordered Zhong Wuheng to return to the Zhong clan to accept his punishment, but who could have thought that he would actually attend this elder conference? "Speak. What's the reason behind your objection?" Sword Saint Xing asked with narrowed eyes. It had not been easy for him to get his son back, and he was planning on making up the 20 years of absence to his son. Yet, who could have thought that someone would oppose his decision at this point in time? This made him extremely displeased. "Clan head, I don't mean to be rude, but the position of clan head has always been inherited by the offspring with the purest bloodline. Zhong Xian might be your son and the young prodigy of the Zhong clan, but his Zhong clan bloodline is already undetectable. Under such circumstances, I believe that is unqualified to inherit the position of clan head," Zhong Wuheng said calmly. "His Zhong clan bloodline is undetectable. Does that mean that the blood of the Zhong clan doesn't run in his veins?" First elder, what does that mean? The other elders were taken aback by the news. Back then, Zhong Wuchen had moved discreetly under Zhong Wuheng's orders to test Zhong Xian's bloodline in the blood reservoir, so other than the two of them and the Xingmeng sword saints, no one else was aware of the matter. "Elder Wuchen, why don't you report the results of your investigation to everyone here?" Zhong Wuheng gestured grandly. "Yes, First Elder." Zhong Wuchen walked to the front of the crowd before continuing. "When Zhong Xian was in our Zhong clan a few days ago, I had a hunch that he could be the young prodigy, so I secretly took him into the blood reservoir to test his bloodline. However, very soon, Zhong Wuchen went through the details of what he had seen in the blood reservoir. Without the Zhong clan bloodline, he can't even be considered a member of the Zhong clan. How can such a person be our clan head?" A huge uproar broke out amid the crowd after hearing the INS announce of the matter. They had tested the bloodline of the young prodigy when he was born, and the sheer purity of his bloodline shocked the entire clan. It was in view of this that they had unanimously nominated him to be their clan head despite his young age. However, when he returned 20 years later, there was not the slightest drop of the Zhong clan bloodline in his veins. How could they still accept him as their clan head? The Zhong clan bloodline is the very symbol of authority in our Zhong clan. Since our clan head has already verified the matter, I don't doubt that Zhong Xian is indeed an offspring of our Zhong clan. However, if he has lost his Zhong clan bloodline, I'm afraid that it would be contrary to the teachings of our ancestors to make him our clan head." Zhong Wuheng clasped his fist and bowed deeply. "I am opposing this for the sake of our Zhong clan. Clan head, I beseech you to reconsider your decision." "You." Sword Saint Xing's complexion turned incomparably awful after hearing Zhong Wuheng's words. After all the trouble that he had gone through to find his son, he had thought that everything would swiftly fall back into place. Yet, who could have thought that Zhong Wuheng would be able to stop him so easily? The reason that Zhong Wuheng had given was simple but powerful. There was indeed a rule in the Zhong clan's teachings stating that only offspring who had achieved a certain level of purity in their bloodline would be qualified to become the clan head. Considering how his son did not have the slightest bit of the Zhong clan bloodline running through his veins, there was no legitimacy to him becoming the clan head. "What do you propose then?" Sword Saint Xing spat coldly as he stared piercingly at Zhong Wuheng. "What I propose is very simple. We'll nominate the offspring whose bloodline has reached the mark to become our next clan head." Zhong Wuheng replied with a grand wave of his hand. "Even my bloodline hasn't reached the level of purity required to become the clan head. Who else in the clan could possibly have met the mark?" Sword Saint Xing narrowed his eyes coldly. It was apparent that Zhong Wuheng was intentionally making things difficult for them. He currently possessed the purest bloodline in the Zhong clan, with the exception of his son 20 years ago, but still, he had not reached the level of purity required to be inaugurated as a true clan head. Given so, who else could possibly meet the mark? Clearly, Zhong Wuheng was cooking up this fuss just to stop Zhong Xian from becoming the next clan head. Clan head, just because your bloodline hasn't reached the required level of purity doesn't mean that no one else's has. I have already found someone in the clan whose bloodline purity reaches the mark and, perhaps, far exceeds it even. Zhong Wuheng burst into hearty laughter as he raised his hand and gestured. Come in. Who? Following which, a figure slowly walked into the hall. I have already tested his bloodline, and I am certain that it meets the mark required to become the clan head. In fact, in terms of sheer purity, he's on par with even the young prodigy back then. If he isn't qualified to become the clan head, no one else is. Zhong Wuheng raised his hand and shrouded the figure with his energy. Following which, a brilliant burst of light shone from the figure. What formidable purity this is! Everyone in the hall narrowed their eyes in astonishment. Even amid the blinding light, they could feel that the energy harnessed in the other party's bloodline far exceeded theirs, almost as if the searing sun. Even Sword Saint Xing could not help but frown upon seeing this. He could sense that the other party's bloodline was far stronger than his, such that they were not even on the same level as one another. His bloodline has exceeded every single one of us here, and I believe none of you should have any doubt that he has already met the mark required to become the clan head. I presume that none of you will have any objections to him becoming the clan head, right? Zhong Wuheng gazed at the astounded crowd and laughed triumphantly. But at this moment, Zhong Xian suddenly spoke up. Come here. Upon seeing Zhong Xian interjecting at this critical moment, Zhong Wuheng lashed out furiously. Zhong Xian, you might be the young prodigy, but without the slightest droplet of our Zhong clan bloodline in your veins, I'm afraid that you don't have a say here. Our Zhong clan is currently in the midst of nominating our next clan head, so I'll have to ask an outsider like you to hold your tongue. But before he could finish his words, the figure who had just walked in hurriedly strode over to Zhong Xian and kneeled to the floor. Zhong Jiuxiao pays respect to teacher. The figure who had just entered the hall was none other than Zhong Jiuxiao. Yuan, rise. Zhong Xian reached out to fondle Zhong Jiuxiao's head lightly before turning an amused gaze toward Zhong Wuheng. With an impassive voice, he asked, First Elder, can you repeat what you said earlier? I'm afraid that I didn't catch your words clearly. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.